Why don't we go ahead and get started? So I just want to start off by thanking all of you for being here today to participate in the latest DACC Advisory Committee Learning Series event. This time we're going to be focusing on the African American populations. So for those that don't know me, my name is Jamoya Cox, and I'm the Disparities in Health, the Disparities and Cultural Competency Lead for the Ohio Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services. One of the key and critical programs that we're working to implement is the Disparities and Cultural Competency Advisory Committee. The Learning Series is, in fact, one of those strategies coming out of the DACC work to really bring to you those best and promising practices being implemented at the local level that could help to improve engagement and retention for special populations throughout the state of Ohio. So part of the aim as the DACC is to look at those overarching broad issues that we need to address to reach health equity, as well as those local level things that we're really trying to do that as well. So just a little bit of background information before I introduce our speakers. The African American community experiences a range of disparities relating to mental health. For example, African Americans are overrepresented at 18 to 25% in the behavioral health system, and likely to be diagnosed with schizophrenia at hospital at discharge. There is evidence that African Americans are less likely to receive culturally competent services, an issue when coupled with stigma results in lower health seeking and service retention. And understanding the unique perceptions, needs, and differences in the African American community can lead to delivering culturally competent behavioral health services. And so we're certainly glad that we have several key individuals from the community that have been doing this for several years. So we're hoping that you could learn new things, gain some insights on what has been successful and continues to be successful at the local level. So today with us we have Gloria Walker from JW Consulting and Educational Services. She's also with NAMI, Urban Greater Cincinnati Network. We also have with us Fred Comedy with the Franklin County UMADAP. We have with us Robbie Brandon, and she is with Sunlight Village. And last but certainly not least, we have Raphael Weston, who is a young adult who's going to be sharing his perspective on system engagement. So with that, I want to introduce to you Gloria Walker. She's going to be our first presenter.
When I was first asked to do this training, it was just coincidental. It was after one of our NAMI Urban Greater Cincinnati monthly meetings, and our membership had said, you know, February is Black History Month. So instead of us having a speaker and doing the usual thing that we do at our meetings, why don't we do some research on African Americans and mental health? And so when I was asked to do this, I started looking at the research that I had uncovered. And these are some of the things that I had found. I understood that the objectives for this training would be to understand services being delivered in Ohio. I'm from Southwest Ohio. I'm sure delivery, as much as you'd like them to be the same, they're probably different in different areas of the state. I looked at not just understanding services being delivered in Ohio, but I felt like there was a need for understanding the history and the need for cultural sensitivity, because I had believed and have believed that it's not just cultural competence, it's understanding culture and applying some of those things that you learn from a culture to that culture to help them to get engaged in the system. One of the objectives was to look at existing service gaps and emerging access barriers. I looked at the gap of communication. I think there's a lot of talking and very little listening to what African Americans in particular have to say when it comes to directing their health care. And I believe there's not enough in the area of community outreach, to reach out to the African American community, to get them engaged, and to help them to understand about mental illness, to understand about recovery, and that people can recover. And I looked at best promising practices improving health equity. I go back a long way, further than Jamoya, with the Department of Mental Health, with issues of mental illness, because I am a family member, and I know a lot of work has been done, and there is a lot of progress made in the treatment of people and the services that are provided, but we still have a long way to go. So I want to recognize some of the local agencies and boards that I'm involved with that I think have made some great strides, but they can still do better. I'm a family member and I'm an advocate. So let me start with a little history. Scientific racism. I was surprised to find out that Dr. Benjamin Rush, a signer of the Declaration of Independence, dean of the medical school at the University of Pennsylvania, the father of American psychiatry, I was surprised to find that he described Negroes as what they were called, we were called, amongst other things. Described Negroes as suffering from an affliction called negritude, which was thought to be a mild form of leprosy, and the only cure for the disorder was to become white. History. In 1851, a Dr. Samuel Cartwright, a prominent Louisiana physician and one of the leading authorities in his time on the medical care of Negroes, identified two mental disorders peculiar to slaves: drapetomania, or the disease causing Negroes to run away. Yeah, a condition unknown by medical authorities, although its diagnostic symptoms, the absconding from service, was well known to planters and overseers. And he observed that the cause of most cases that induces a Negro to run away from service in such a disease of the mind as in any other species of alienation, and much more curable as a general rule. And his description was that these Negroes were sulky and had dissatisfied behavior, and to cure that, they had to be whipped. That was a therapeutic early intervention. Planters and overseers were encouraged to use whipping as a primary intervention once the disease, being sulky, alienating, once that disease had progressed to the stage of actually running away, they were to be whipped. It's part of the culture. The next thing I looked at were colored hospitals. There's a lot more history, but these I just picked out as examples of what contributes to culture. And if you want to look at the definition of culture, it's the attitudes, the behaviors, the beliefs, the customs, habits, language, and values that are characteristic of a group, African Americans, society or organization in a particular place and time, the accumulated knowledge of which is passed to the next generation through socialization. So it's passed down. Maybe not exact, maybe it changes from one generation to the next, but that seed is there and it needs to be addressed. So I found the colored hospitals. First of all, African Americans were frequently housed in public places, such as the poorhouse, the jail, or the insane asylum. And I gotta say, when I ran across that, I started thinking, you know, that's not so much different from today. We still got a long way to go, okay? These facilities almost always had substandard conditions, kind of like today, If conditions in the facilities were poor for white patients, conditions were completely inhumane for the African American patient. For instance, one of the first patients admitted to the South Carolina Lunatic Asylum in 1829 was a 14-year-old slave named Jefferson. Jefferson's name was never recorded in the admission book, and he was reportedly housed in the yard. He was admitted only as a favor to his owner, since the facility did not officially receive blacks. In March of 1875, the North Carolina General Assembly appropriated $10,000 to build a colored insane asylum. The Eastern Asylum for the Colored Insane was opened in 1880 with accommodations for 420 patients. The facility at Goldsboro underwent several name changes throughout its history, and it remains in operation as a psychiatric facility today. In 1877, I think I got my dates right on this, the General Assembly appointed a committee to recommend the selection of a site for a facility that would serve African American mentally ill citizens statewide. 1878, 171 acres were purchased 2 miles west of Goldsboro. In 1880, the first patient was admitted to the new asylum for colored insane. In 1959, the name was changed to Cherry Hospital in honor of the Governor, Greg Cherry. Cherry Hospital was the only facility in the state for mentally ill blacks until 1965. That doesn't sound like a long time ago to me, but for some of you who are much younger than I am, yeah, that seems like a long time ago, but that really wasn't that far. When the hospital was desegregated following the 1964 Civil Rights Act. As of the early 2000s, Cherry Hospital cared for hundreds of patients from 33 counties in eastern North Carolina. In 1925, Junius Wilson, a 17-year-old deaf and mute black man, was accused of rape, castrated, and remanded for incarceration by Goldsboro by a lunacy jury. The rape charges were eventually dropped in the 1970s, and at some point, authorities realized that Mr. Wilson was neither mentally ill nor retarded, simply hearing impaired. And in 1994, at the age of 86, Mr. Wilson was moved to a cottage on the grounds of the facility now known as Cherry Hospital. The move to the cottage was the state's effort to make up for Mr. Wilson's 72-year incarceration, and he died there in 2001. Now, just a little about me, because I could go on forever. I am Gloria Walker. I am executive director and co-founder of NAMI, that's the National Alliance of Mental Illness, Urban Greater Cincinnati Network on Mental Illness, NAMI UGC NOMI. And I currently sit on the NAMI National Board, and I sit on the NAMI Ohio Board. I've been an advocate for years and have credited my involvement for the success of my loved one who has lived for the past close to 30 years with a serious mental illness. And by the way, I just want to tell everybody he is well into his recovery. He lives in the community. He is a success story, and he's doing wonderful. By the way, he manages his illness, and he self-directs and self-manages his illness and works well with his doctor, his case manager, and everybody else they have around the team. But that never would have happened had I not been involved to the extent that I was, or have been. I became an advocate because when he first became symptomatic, we had no access to information. We had no clue what was going on, no education about mental illness. We had no resources and no understanding of mental illness and no understanding of this system, which is probably the reason I've been at the Ohio Department of Mental Health, not hired, but up here getting in everybody's way, trying to make things happen over the years. NAMI UGC NOMI came about because there was an unfulfilled need in my community. There was a NAMI, there still is a NAMI in my community, but there was no outreach, no real effective outreach into my community. So I had people that had no clue, just as I was 30 years ago. Now, what does NAMI Urban Greater Cincinnati do that's different? Well, we have monthly meetings, and we have family-to-family. We provide the family-to-family 12-week education piece, which is the evidence-based practice that NAMI has developed. We do the Sharing Hope, which NAMI National had developed originally for African American communities. Now it's with Asian communities and Latino communities. We have partnerships. We are partnering with AKA, I was just telling Jamoya just before we got started, we are partnering with AKA. NAMI National has an MOU, Memorandum of Understanding, with AKA at the national level. And our NAMI has an understanding in partnering with the 2 chapters of AKA at our local level. AKA, for those of you who don't know, is the oldest African American sorority in the country and the largest, gotta brag, strong Black women. Yes, they are. And so we partner with them. We partner with the Red Cross. We partner with an organization called Real Abilities. I want you to get this. It's REELABILITIES. Real Abilities Film Festival. They hold a film festival every 2 years. We partner with them so that on March the 3rd, we will be presenting at the Esquire Theater in Cincinnati the movie Bipolarized. We will be bringing in the guy that wrote it and is starred in it. We have a panel of people from the community, Dr. Tracy Scale, community psychiatrist. We have a police officer who's been through the CIT training. We have a family member, that's me, I'm emceeing. We have a family member, and we have someone who is presenting with a serious mental illness. So we do community outreach. We go to churches, we go to events, we set up materials, we make ourselves accessible to anybody that's out there, wherever we can, whenever we can, and we get calls from people who are experiencing just what other people experience when they had first dealt with living with a serious mental illness. We offer that networking. We offer all of that through networking so that people know how to get in touch with us. We tell one to tell one to tell one to tell one who we are and what we do. We started all of this because no one seemed to have been doing that to reach out to our community. And of course, we offer support. So we spend a lot of time on the phone because we all have cell phones and all of our cell phones are accessible to the public. I think mine is even on the national website. But I get calls from people, and you know, the thing that we have to do first is listen. And sometimes that just makes people feel better that are going through this, whether they are a client, whether they're a family member, whether they're a good friend, or they're just curious, because people in the community want to know. Okay. I've been around a long time for a lot of these agencies that have changed names, changed directors, but they've continued to move forward. And so I want to just let you know who are some of these agencies that are moving forward, that are progressive, that are looking at new and different things to do, and also who are supportive of us. First and foremost, there's Central Community Health Board. Director Bennett Cooper have been supportive of us from the very beginning. the Greater Cincinnati Behavioral Health Services, very supportive, understanding that they don't have all the answers, and so to reach out in the community, they have to look to NAMI, Urban Greater Cincinnati, and other organizations that are out there, so that people will be engaged in the services head on and not be afraid because of the culture, not be suspicious because of the culture. There's Talbot House who supports us, that helps us along as well. There's Hamilton County Mental Health and Recovery Services Board, that's Pat Tribby, who's been very supportive of us and has even come to some of our events to speak. And then, of course, there's Liz Banks at Summit Behavioral Health Care. She hosts 3 of our meetings every year at Summit Behavioral and gives everybody the history of it, shows the video that she has, PowerPoint, I think, presentation that she has of all of the history of Summit Behavioral Health Care. So what do they do? What do we do to try to get the word out there and to try to help people to stay engaged in the system? Well, we are very culturally sensitive. So cultural sensitivity and access are the 2 things that I would recommend. These aren't all the answers. This is a rather broad way of looking at this issue, but some of this is just plain common sense that people don't really give thought to. When it comes to cultural sensitivity, be respectful. And a lot of times people who are African Americans feel disrespected because another culture doesn't come across as understanding and being respectful in their way. Listen. Listening. No one wants to listen anymore. Everybody's busy doing the work that they have to do, their documentation, trying to meet that, whatever, I want to say spin down, but that's not the word.
Productivity.
Yeah, productivity. Trying to meet productivity, thank you. Trying to do all of that, and they don't take the time to listen. And the person on the other side of that table or that desk is thinking, this person doesn't respect me. Be understanding. You know, understand that that person's lived experience is so much different than the lived experience that you have. Be empathetic. Not sympathetic, not to sympathize, but be empathetic. And value that person, show value. You know, the simple little things that come with respecting another individual shows value. And what do they need? They need access. They need access to information. Our NAMI Urban Greater Cincinnati is out there all the time trying to get information out to people about mental illness. Like the world learned about HIV and AIDS, and like the world learned about cancer. For some of you, you're much too young to know this, but at one time, cancer had the same stigma that mental illness has today. And the only way you'll overcome it is by educating people, not just the choir, but the community. People need information on mental illness and behavioral disorders, and they need options. They need to know that medication doesn't work the same for everybody, and they need to understand that. They need to be told that. They need more evidence-based services, especially for PTSD, and I'm saying that because I had a clinical person tell me that she's trying to get a particular service for PTSD, and she can't get it for anybody except those who are veterans and through the VA. And then they need community outreach. Be part of the community. As long as you stay distant from the community, you stay distant from people. And that's pretty much me. That's pretty much my experience in a nutshell. And that's pretty much how I see the services that are out there, from the perspective of a family member who has gone through everything that you go through to try to get the treatment and services that you know will work, because it's worked for my son, to try to get that. Thank you.
So I'd like to open it up for some questions now for her. to anyone that may have any questions.
On the national level, why are a lot of mental health facilities seem like they're closing? Because I too have a relative, a brother with mental illness in the state of New York. And a lot of facilities have closed down, and he's in his 50s, and we're just upset that a lot of facilities seem to be closing down. And I know it's the almighty dollar thing and all that, but I'm really struggling with trying to understand why are they putting, he's not in a prison, but they're putting a lot of people with mental health illnesses in prisons instead of keeping these facilities open. And I worked in the prison system for years, so I see that in Ohio alone. So on the national level, what is the issue with getting things together for people with mental illness? And we know it's mental illness is a big issue because of all these shootings and stuff, but it's always after the fact.
Yeah.
They get on TV and they say, we need to help these people. Seriously? So that I don't want to start making it personal and get on my soapbox, but I just wanted some, you know.
I wish I could answer that for you at a national level. I think that at the national level, when you talk about the budget, money is still being budgeted, but the way I understand it, the money comes through the state. Like the money comes down, I can speak for PAMI Council, for PAMI, for the funding that comes into PAMI, because it comes into the state, and the state decides what they're going to do. I don't know about New York, but I can tell you that it was back in the 80s that started the closing the hospitals and started
The
treatment in the the institutionalization, and they started to figure out about community treatment in the agencies, and the funding, as I understand it, never really came to that. I think you're getting more and more funding now, but the decisions to do that is a statewide decision, or the community. Personally, I'm glad they don't go back to the asylums. I'm glad they don't go back to the hospitals, because in my opinion, when Longview was Longview here in Southwest Ohio, it was beautiful to look at from the outside, but all the issues about mental illness were hidden. They never came out until people came out into the community. And now people are faced with, these are people, and these people need treatment, they need services, and people don't have to be locked up for life. They can live out in the community and have a productive life. So I'm glad that we don't just put people away. I know that more people end up in the prison system because people in the community don't understand this bizarre behavior, and they do commit crimes. Once they go into the prison system, I don't think necessarily if that's the best place to treat them, no. But I think we're looking at how that can change. And for the very reason, finances and money. Because if you can treat them cheaper out on the street, in the community, than you do when they're in prison, fine. Let's do that. Yes, ma'am.
I'm familiar with Talbert House. I'm familiar with Greater Cincinnati Behavioral Health. My question is, because I lived in Cincinnati for a couple of years and just moved up here in the Walnut Hills area.
Ah, yeah, not
so
far
I'm
from me.
familiar with your work.
Yeah.
What can be done with the revitalization or the redevelopment agencies that are revitalizing the neighborhoods where there's a lot of persistent mental health issues or addiction issues like Walnut Hills, because I see the revitalization going toward gentrification, but not toward community empowerment of people that live there, especially people that are shunted away. And so we constantly have this struggle to try to bring some visibility to, these are people that are human, and how can the agencies maybe get more involved in the community rather than just providing services in the office or?
That's a really good question and a really good point of view to give some serious thought to. Now, I know the Walnut Hills Redevelopment Council, whatever it's called, I know that the director of Greater Cincinnati Behavioral has been involved with them. I'm not sure of the political issues around those redevelopment that's taking, all the redevelopment or gentrification that's taking place. I don't know if the agencies have the political power. I'm probably gonna get myself in trouble here, but I don't know if they have the political power or the resources to really impact that gentrification that's taking place. I have my concerns as well, because I live in Evanston,
Right.
and it's happening in Evanston. The one thing that I will say that they can do, and some of them are doing, is they're dispersing the housing that they have outside of just the central area. You know, all the mental health housing and everything was right in the corridor along Victory Parkway, and you know, so now they're kind of making for better housing, and I think that's one area that we can look at maybe to make a difference.
Normally when you have revitalization, you kind of have two things going on. One, it could be something initiated by as a result of policy at the local level by that local system or that city. Oftentimes they have neighborhood planning that initiates neighborhood revitalization, urban renewal. That's an opportunity for individuals from the various systems to engage that process, because oftentimes they outline what the plan or the plan for redevelopment may be over the course of 5 to 10 to 15 years. So getting involved early on with conceptualizing that plan is extremely important to ensuring that as new resources are being made available at the community level, when they're trying to look at really make available new housing, build new buildings to support various different sectors, we want to make sure that health and behavioral health are included in that discussion, so that those specific services are located specifically in key areas. The other thing is free enterprise. Oftentimes, for-profit and nonprofit entities, when they know these specific plans are made available, they start looking at opportunities and ways to make available new housing and do infill development. That's another opportunity for our system to kind of engage those local entities as well. So those are multiple opportunities, just a matter of having stakeholders from these systems engage that process so that it's included in the revitalization effort. We're going to proceed with our next speaker, who's Craig Comedy.
I thought for a while how to approach this topic. There's a lot of conversations these days regarding cultural competency, and often the conversation really revolves around ideas on how large social service agencies or hospitals can approach culturally diverse clientele. But in my view, if you really want to be able to approach diverse groups, you really have to invest specifically in each group that you want to work with. You can't really just have an overarching approach, methodology of diversity, and not specifically invest in each group that you want to provide services for, because you have to know and understand their culture. So when I developed this presentation, I wanted to use a prevention tool. I realize that many of you all may not work in prevention, so I wanted to introduce you to a prevention tool that we use really to assess risk and protective factors in communities that we serve. In specific, I work in high-risk African American communities. One in particular is a public housing community in Columbus, Ohio, Rosewind. used to be known as Windsor Terrace. A lot of public housing communities changed their names when there's been a lot of traumatic events happen and a lot of stigma related to the name. So after a while, you get a new name and you're reborn, and then the stigma and the traumatic events happen, and then all of a sudden you'll change your name eventually again. But we have to be specific. I can't just say I work with the African American population. There's a lot of diversity in African American communities, a lot of diversity. So you have to really be specific about the community that you're going to serve if you really want to do a good job in serving them. So I wanted to go over a few ways that we use to assess risk. And we can do this either through a survey. You have culturally competent staff that can make observations, and then you're always assessing behavior in your programs as you see it. But one of the areas is individual. A lot of people used to focus on self-esteem. And I said, no, we really can't focus on self-esteem. We have to really focus on self-concept, because people can have very high self-esteem around a very negative self-concept. I can feel very good about some very unhealthy behavior that I engage in. So in my community, if there is a lot of support or a lot of, if I have a person who's in a gang and they get a lot of support or admiration from their peers for their role in the gang, well, they may have a high self-esteem. But their self-concept of themselves and where they can go with that is negative. So really, we focus on making sure that the young people are assessing the young people's self-concept. Are they engaging in harmful behavior? A lot of us look at inner city communities and we talk about, yes, there's a great amount of violence that may occur in this community and other negative activity. But what activity is the person that I'm working with engaging in? And again, you have to have an investment in that, in them to really know and understand that. Drug and alcohol experimentation, poor school performance. Those are some of the things that we look at in our young people individually to really assess, what their personal risk factors are. We look at families, unemployed and underemployed, and there's a difference. Both may be risk factors, but a family who is unemployed and may be unemployed for a couple of generations is vastly different family than one who is underemployed. Or one who maybe they are unemployed, but their parents were gainfully employed and the family's on a road to becoming employed. It has everything to do with how that family life is structured. And I'll get into that more as we go on. Drug use. We had a survey with the Franklin County Urban Coalition. It is a urban coalition here in Columbus, and our focus was on African Americans 18 to 25 and marijuana use. Many of the young people that we surveyed in our usage survey reported that their families, I think it was either in the 40s or over 50%, they had family members that abused a substance, primarily alcohol. That makes a difference in who you get in your program. So knowing that is important. Low levels of monitoring. You have families that, don't really watch what their kids do. Their kids go outside, they come back home when they come back home. You have other families in the same community who watch everything that their kids do. You don't make an assumption because of what community you're in, what occurs. You may make an overall assumption that yes, some of these factors do happen in this community more than in others, but when you're working with individual people, you really have to assess them that way. So we look at families, what their levels of monitoring are, what their investment is in their kids, what their expectations are. How involved are they in school? A lot of parents that we work with, they didn't do well in school. Maybe they didn't finish school. But we push them to have an involvement with their child in school. When they walk into the school, who's experiencing the trauma? The kid or the parent? The parent has their own unresolved traumatic experiences, often in the same very school that their child is now in. And no one helps them deal or grapple with that. And often the schools have the same approach with the parent. that they had with the parent when the parent was in school, which was negative, with the kids. And the parents walking in, they may not have finished school. They're talking to a school administrator that has a master's or PhD, and they're very uncomfortable, even if they look the same, because of the nature of the relationship. So who's really looking at what that parent's involvement is in the school and why? Peer relationships. Do you have friends that are engaged in criminal activity? A lot of people just really look at a community on a surface level and say, okay, well, there's a lot of kids in here involved in gangs. And then we know that this happens in our communities anyway. We have police that say, oh, there's a lot of gang involvement. Well, a lot of the activity is really not gang related. Sometimes there's a lot of violence that has nothing to do with gangs. Kids may claim gang involvement just for safety reasons, but often a lot of the conflict that we come across in the communities that we serve really have very little to do with gang involvement. But there's a lot of money if you claim that it's gang involvement. There's special attention that you can get and give to violence in communities if you claim gang involvement. But it is important to know, what activities do the peers of the kids that you have in your program engage in. Poor school performance. And there are a lot of issues around poor school performance. It's not just what you get on the grade card. We have a lot of kids in our programs who are really functionally illiterate. They may know what that word says, but they do not know the definition, and they do not know how to put it in context to what they're reading. So because they can read a word does not mean that they know how to read. And a lot of people miss that. So we have kids in our programs that are at grade level, but may get an F. We have other kids that are 2 or 3 levels behind, and they get an F, but they're not the same. So you really have to assess what their risk factors are around their school performance and their grades and their friends. Violence. How many kids in our programs do they engage in violence? And again, you can look at the overall community, but what are their peers engaging in? You look at that individually, and you look at that through the peer groups, because your kids, if they and their peers are in your program and they work kind of together as a group, it's important to know. Sometimes you have to, if I want to address this young man or this young woman here, I really need to talk to this person over here, because that's their main source of advice and guidance when they first enter my program. There's going to have to be a transfer from them to me, but I'm going to have to find out who has the power in this group. This young person over here may have a lot more influence than I do, so I might have to build my relationship with them first. So understanding peer relationships is important, and risk factors related to that. Community issues, economic and social deprivation. Those are large issues in some communities, in communities that I serve. It's very hard when you're asking a kid to lead a life through your program or the curriculum that you're using that they can't see on a daily basis. You're asking them to do things that may not readily fit in their lived reality. Understanding what their lived reality is like is important, and it's amazing that you can sometimes have 20, 30, some urban communities, especially in impoverished areas, over 100 agencies serving that particular community, and no one is really going out and engaging the community to know what these issues are. The lack of community involvement by social service agencies is much less than it used to be, at least in my view. You have to understand the crime, the drug use, and the access to alcohol and illegal drugs. One of the things that came across in our usage survey with our Franklin County Urban Coalition, it wasn't just that 40-some% of the 18 to 25-year-olds in our usage survey use marijuana. Over 50% approved of using marijuana. It didn't see much risk in its use. So when you're in a community where it's acceptable use and supported by a large part of the group, how you approach that issue is very different. Going in and just saying, hey, this is horrible and so forth. Well, my cousin says it's okay, or this person, now you're going to go against them too, you're going to put them down. It may happen in my household. So how you approach the issue is different if it's seen or viewed differently in that community. Schools. I really challenge people to go to the state website and look at the school report cards in the communities in which you work. School system does a great job of promoting STEM academies, and they have all of this terminology for science-based curriculums and so forth, and I really hope that it works out for a lot of schools. But when you look at the test and you look at the performance of the students from those schools, it's horrible. You can go to some of the worst or most economically deprived rural communities and not see anything close to what you see in urban areas in the schools. And then I hear the conversation, well, African American kids don't test well. I don't believe that. I believe educated kids of any group will test well. We're not talking about complex advanced SAT or GRE or LSAT tests. We're talking about basic level tests. And if you think it's just a testing issue, then walk through the school. You walk through a lot of our schools, and the things that you see and hear are really amazing. So when kids are being sent daily to schools who are have a lot of disruption, a lot of conflict, a lot of teachers who are not culturally competent, teachers who are fresh out of school, did not grow up regardless of race, it could be African American or white or Asian, did not grow up in the community in which they're working. Outside of maybe the one diversity course they had to take as part of their degree, really don't have an understanding of the reality that their kids live in, and the school curriculums really don't deal with social emotional learning issues. So because of it, their issues aren't dealt with. And society, how does society view that particular group? If you're a young African American male in the inner city, what is the visual representation that you see from the larger society? When do you end up on the news? Yeah. You can't find an inner city community where you don't have kids come out of that community, go to college, do well, become doctors, lawyers, and so forth. How often do you see them, on TV? But we readily, on a daily basis, have visual imagery of kids in their own communities who are engaging in negative activities. Then you have the music industry, which also does a very good job of glamorizing some of the very behavior that we're working so hard to stop. And what I tell people is that they do the same thing that the tobacco industry does and the liquor industry does when you go to corner stores. All right, when you go to corner stores, people will see visual representations of people who look like them but look physically healthy and engaging in substances, right? They have that wine cooler, or they have that, the things in our community, Mad Dog or Wild Irish, all the things that are put in our corner stores, but they look healthy. And they're pushing, or the people smoking, a cigarette, they look healthy. So they're doing the same thing in the music industry that they're doing in the tobacco and the alcohol industry. So you have to be able to assess all of these things if you really want to understand the risk of the people that you're working with. And that's easy because there's a lot of statistics. We talk about disparities all the time. We're overrepresented in all the negative and underrepresented in all the positive. What's more difficult for a lot of us is really to look at the protective factors. Now, if you live in an inner city community, and I know we'll do question and answers, but I'll just, I'll ask quick questions, and if people can yell it out, that's fine. If not, I'll fill it in. But who are most of the people that, if I'm in a public housing community, who am I interacting with? Often. What social service agencies? Child Protective, are they coming to say hello, have a nice day? Are they threatening to take anything away from me?
Yeah.
Okay. So who else? We have child services.
Police.
Police. Are they coming offering something or threatening to take something away?
Your life, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So who else? Pardon me?
Housing authority.
And when they come in to inspect, are they critiquing what they see? Often? Yeah. And sometimes are their views of the people that they serve healthy or unhealthy? It can be, now it can be healthy because a lot of the supports when we work in the centers is, but they face some of the same trauma and issues that a lot of our customers face. A lot of our customers walk around saying no one comes out of here and they do well. Everyone's involved in violence, everyone's killing each other, everyone's using drugs and so forth and so forth. Even if I share with you over 40% of African Americans in our target zip codes were using marijuana 18 to 25, who am I leaving off of that statistic?
60%.
Yeah. All right, I'm leaving off the ones who aren't. Because everyone wants to focus on those who are. But yeah, they're interacting with a lot of negative forces, people who are coming in and threatening to take something away from them. When you come in as a prevention agency, you have to really work hard to build a different relationship and let them know, I can't take anything away from you. I can only give and offer. I don't work for, you don't have to see me even. The prevention program, unlike some other programs in social services, they don't have to interact with your program. Kids don't have to show up. Parents don't have to send their kids. It is a choice. It is a positive choice they make, which we remind them on a daily basis, when we're thanking them for sending them, but you have to acknowledge that. So going back to the protective factors, individually, positive self-concept. Some of the kids that we work with do have a positive self-concept. You have to acknowledge that. How many people have ever went into an environment or high risk? Everyone deals with the kids who are acting up. And you see those 3, 4, 5 kids that are sitting there doing what they're supposed to do and they don't get any attention. They do get a good grade sometimes for not necessarily doing the academic work, but for sitting there quietly, but they get very little attention for it. You have to acknowledge who in your group has a positive self-concept. Critical thinking skills. A lot of our kids have strong critical thinking skills. They may use them in the wrong ways.
Yeah.
But if you can acknowledge that that kid has good critical thinking skills, then you can help redirect that often in ways in which it's going to be in that kid's best interest. Some of the negative peer leadership has very good critical thinking skills. They may be some of the first people that you want to convince in your program to invest in the program, because then they have the ability to bring others along. Involvement in healthy drug-free activities. They're coming to our program. Wow, I'm not involved in it. Yes, you are. You made the decision. And one of the greatest things about working in inner city environments, a lot of the kids that come, their parents don't make them come. Sometimes you don't know why they come back.
Yeah.
Because you give them such a hard time, when they come. In our programs, you can't get to anything before you do academic work. You can't get to a recreational activity. You can't go on a field trip. You can't do anything if you don't do your work first. And that is painful for a lot of the kids in our program. But we always have to acknowledge and let them know that, look, you got a protective factor. In spite of that, you come every day, even though sometimes neither you or I know why you come, because it is painful for you. Family factors. We have a lot of families in our communities. While we have a lot that don't, we have a lot that do. And those are things that you can build on. Spend quality time with the children. They have high expectations for their children. We have parents that role model healthy behavior. We have a lot of parents who may be on public assistance, but they're in school. They go to Columbus State, community college. Some of them go to Ohio State. They're in technical schools. They're going to be a home health aide. They're in a nursing aide school. You have to acknowledge that. And in a lot of those homes, you have parents that are doing a very good job at regulating, their kids' lives. And they role model studying. So you have to acknowledge that with those parents and have those parents help be role models for other parents in the community who aren't. Value and encourage education and involved in the school. So we do have families that have that. Peers. One of the greatest peer groups that the kids involved in after-school programs and summer programs can have are the relationships that they build while in your program. We do longitudinal programming, meaning that we like to be in the same communities for long periods of time. We like to work with youth, not for those little curriculums, 14 weeks, 12 weeks, or whatever. We like to work with them year after year after year. We like to work with their younger brothers or sisters, family members, friends, neighbors. We like to have long relationships, and having done that, a lot of the kids in our programs develop lifelong, healthy, drug-free relationships over the span of their lives. I have staff in my agency who grew up in our programs. I started working for the UMANOP in Franklin County when I was 20 years old. One of the staff and our main program coordinator started being a participant when he was 16, living in a public housing community. Now he has his master's degree in public administration, and he's working with the community. His cultural competence skills are excellent. His role modeling is excellent for the young people that he serves. But those peer relationships that they form in your groups are extremely important and something to be promoted. Communities. People tear up the Linden area, especially the East Linden area, a lot. It ends up on the news a lot, and those events do happen in those communities. I'm not denying them. But there are a lot of churches, a lot of social organizations. We have the resident council in Rosewind, who is very heavily involved. It's a council made up of residents who have a leadership role in their community and do a lot of positive things in the community. So while there are larger issues, you can still connect your families and the kids that you work with healthy people and community activities within their community. But you have to know the community to be able to do that. And again, it amazes me how many people work in communities and have no idea on what occurs there. Now, I don't care how many close to homes you have for hospitals. Just because you move your agency into a community does not mean that you have an interaction in that community. And I find that more and more. Social service institutions are so much more insular than they used to be. I grew up in a social work household. My mom worked in mental health industry, halfway houses mainly with those who had schizophrenia. And there was a lot of community activities that her mental health center did where they invited the community to come in and participate. A lot of relationships were built with families. Now you have a lot of institutionalization even when you're located in specific areas that you didn't used to have historically. And you have that across the social service system. And schools, you have to build relationships. I may go into the school, I may critique the structure, the system, and so forth, but there are some good teachers in the schools. They're good teachers, may not be culturally competent. Maybe you have to help them with that crosswalk to understanding the kids that they're working with better, but they have a good heart, they have some skill sets, and you have to acknowledge that and build those relationships. And while the larger society may have a negative or dim view, there are other parts of the society that you can connect your kids with where they can see positive imagery of themselves in their communities. The African American Museum in Cincinnati. I was working with a group of kids in Poindexter Village before it was torn down here in Columbus, Ohio, and one of the quilts there was made by a person from their community. And it's not enough just to show them someone who physically looks like them. They have to know and understand their lived experience. They have to realize that that person made the journey from their particular community or a similar community to where they are now. You know, so just parading a president or other people, you know, in front of them really is not enough. They have to understand that that person is taking a journey that they can as well. So really understanding the protective factors, the strengths of a community, even if it has all the negative statistics around it, is important when you're building a program. And if you don't have that specific skill set, I don't know what kind of policy that you can have to be culturally competent with the population. You have to understand that population. Another prime example, most of my work is with elementary and middle school youth, some high school. We had a project, Franklin County Urban Coalition, working with 18 to 25-year-olds. Yes, I do work in similar communities. Yes, I had some cultural competency and the other providers did. But for many of us, it's a different age group. So we had to invest in what we understood about that population because their lived reality in the same community is different. When we did the community readiness survey with older adults in the community, the vast majority of those adults believed that marijuana was extremely harmful. It's just the 18 to 25-year-olds that had acceptance. The older adults in the community said no. Over 70%, I believe. Help me, Tristan, if I mess up any of the statistics there. But you know, over 70%, no, this is a real problem in our community. So, you know, I'm working with a specific population. The mindset's different. The level of disenfranchisement is different. I have to understand that specific population that I'm working with. And often for me, when we have these larger discussions of cultural competency, these skill sets to really assess a community and assess the people that we work with in this way is often left out. Talking about developing a plan with existing resources, I know we all would like to have more resources. Those of us in prevention who are often at the bottom of the resource list we have learned to do as much as we can with what we have. But one of the things that's often left out is really culturally specific data and research. And when we have conversations about evidence-based curriculums, and evidence-based services, you know, if SAMHSA puts it up on their website or someone else puts it up officially and calls it evidence-based with a particular population, we kind of just tend to accept it. But I don't, because I really want, well, how are you evidence-based? Or how's a curriculum that was born in Iowa working with this particular population? How is it really evidence-based for the community in which I work? And how are they getting these results? I'm working with the curriculum provider, and I purchase some evidence-based curriculums. We end up modifying them more than we, follow them to fidelity. But honestly, if I'm working in a high-risk environment, and your curriculum is saying, if the philosophy of your curriculum says the overall community is healthy, and we're just trying to get those who have gone off track back with the overall community, well, it's a little different view of things when you're working in a high-risk community, right? Because I'm asking the young people in my program to really have a duality of experience, right? Because I'm asking them to act in a certain way in my program, but they're going to leave my program. And they have to leave my program and walk back and forth to school every day. And then there's going to be a different value set that they're going to have to negotiate. And this curriculum here really doesn't understand that value set. You also see the same thing in institutions or some treatment programs that they do all their work inside of their controlled environment, and then they send the client back out into a different community and don't understand why it doesn't transfer. So again, when things say that they're culturally competent, for communities, you really have to look at it with a strong lens. I think we need to push for more research for the communities that we serve. There's definitely, in my view, and I've asked SAMHSA, I don't just deal with OhioMHAS and push them. I go to national conferences with SAMHSA, either by SAMHSA and with representation from their researchers. I asked them the same questions, and it was amazing. I asked one of the top researchers at SAMHSA, I said, well, where's the research on my population. You keep touting it, I'll get back to you. Let me have your email. I'm waiting for the response. So please question, the research and the data that you get. A lot of our communities have to really deal with larger county data because there's really not culturally specific data sets created for our communities. There's these larger surveys developed, usually with not a great representation by our communities when they're created, and then they're given to our communities. And the data pools are so large, it waters it down. For instance, in Franklin County, I think the usage rate of marijuana in our target population roughly is maybe, or statewide is 18-point-something% with marijuana. Well, you would never catch the 44% unless we did our usage survey. Mm-hmm. And we're one of the few groups, until we formed our urban coalition, that ever pulled data, for our respective population. And there are a lot of people, as Carol has shared with us before, on a state basis, we always don't have great data for specific populations, for specific zip codes, and we have to push for that. Culturally competent staff. I went to see a lecture by a gentleman by the name of Bruce Perry, world-renowned psychiatrist. He was at, I believe it's Zeno's church. 850 people showed up to see this gentleman speak yesterday about trauma. It took me 45 minutes to get out of the parking lot. There were so many people there. So he's well-respected, world-renowned psychiatrist dealing with trauma, primarily with those in high-risk communities. Talked a lot about underserved, underrepresented populations, African-American populations. One of the big things that he said that was hard for people to grapple with is, how do you serve people without understanding their culture, without understanding their lived reality? Right? You want to deal with their behavior and have no understanding of where that behavior comes from. You have to have staff on board that either understands it academically, that has a interaction in the communities that you serve, doesn't mind going out. Another thing about prevention, we're working in the communities. Every day. I have all these people say, I'm scared to go in this community, I'm scared to do this, scared to do that. Well, then why do you want funding to serve the community? What's that about? You're so scared to send you or your staff out to interact in the community, but you are very happy to accept millions of dollars to provide services to the community. There's a problem with that because prevention providers are going out on a daily basis. We do not carry guns. We are going into the homes of the people that we serve daily. So, you have to, if you are an agency that is working in our communities and you don't have that skill set, then link with a community-based agency that does and make that crosswalk. And I'll talk more about that in a minute. You have to develop programming that fits the population you serve. I always have the battle, and I know that my field, prevention, because of money, is moving towards population-based and environmental-based work. And I respect it. It has a definite place. We had an environmental campaign with marijuana in the local radio station that I think really worked well. But when you're working with high-risk populations, they need you there on a continuous basis. You can't go in and do a 14-week, I see you one day a week in your school curriculum. It's helpful as long as they're getting other culturally competent services, but when you're the only culturally competent service they're getting, what research, what data do you have that says that 1 week curriculum, I don't care how culturally competent the curriculum is, the dosage that group or person receives has to have a relationship with the amount of risk and trauma that they face. So you have to develop programs that go above and beyond just one particular curriculum and interaction. And that's why we do longitudinal programming because so many of the kids will, we like you, Mr. Comedy, but you're going to be gone. You're going to come in and do this program. And I even working with CMHS, like, I don't want to leave this community, but we have an opportunity for you over here, and there's more money if we can. Yeah, but they have enough people who leave. You know, I want to stay here. I don't want to go from community. They need to have something in their community that's not transient. Even teachers. I don't know how this happens in the schools. So when a teacher does a good job, then they send them to another school. No, that school needs to have them there. So how you develop your programs is important. You know, how you develop your, I just said on some of the partner serving communities. One of the things that we have to grow in, and a lot of us have to grow in urban centers, is we have to do a better job at working together. Now that OhioMHAS, and for OhioMHAS staff, you know this, now that we have a merger of ODATIS and mental health department, it's work, right? It really is work blending, because everyone has their territory, everyone has their language, everyone has their approaches, but everyone's still working with the same people in the same communities, right? And we have to get past the fighting about, I'm in AOD treatment, I'm in mental health, I'm in prevention, because we're all trying to serve the same communities, and their needs are so great that if we don't develop real strong working relationships, it's the communities that suffer. And I'll give you an example. We had a young gentleman in our program that was engaging in behavior that we just couldn't understand, and we were very culturally competent with our service population. Our productivity in that and service delivery was pretty good. We were helping kids really make a crosswalk from where they were to where we were trying to get them to go, but there was one young person we just could not understand their behavior. And we had a connection with the social worker, and we connected the family with this particular social worker. Now remember, I didn't say agency, I said a particular social worker. Why? Because personal relationships in some communities are important. I just can't send them to the local social service agency. Often their interaction may not be great. You may be sitting in line with a lot of people. You already have stigma issues. So connecting them with the live person that we know is culturally competent was important. But we made that connection. We found out the young person was bipolar. So that started their relationship in the mental health arena. Now, what happened with that person in our program? They stayed in our program. We're not going to have them out of our program. Why? Now we can socialize their peer group to understand how to deal and interact with them. And we didn't have to do classes on being bipolar or even sharing with them their diagnosis. We'd say, hey, look, you know what? This person over here is going to exhibit, the way they go about their life is going to be a little bit different. And you have to accept them for that. And here's how we're going to do that. So now they have peer supports in their communities. In urban areas, you have so many kids who are medicated, and they have that 15-minute interaction or 30-minute interaction, at most 45, with that mental health center that's giving them the medication, or Children's Hospital close to home, and then they're sent back to the community with no supports. We have so many more kids now who are diagnosed and being given drugs that their families, that they and their peers don't understand, and there's no community support for what's occurring with them. So we have to build those relationships. And as we develop our outputs, I just skeletally, put some down that we do. But the main part of any of your outputs has to really do with your understanding of the risk and protective factors, not just for the overall community, but for that specific youth, and the ongoing relationships that you build with the community. Dr. Perry, in his presentation, talked a lot about bonding with the kid and meeting them where they are. We had a cultural competency work group. We had a graduate student doing research on cultural competency come and meet with our staff and asked our staff how they built bonds with the kids that we serve. And it was basically the same thing that Dr. Perry did in his clinical psychiatric work. Meet them where they are. Listen to them. Get down to their level. Invest in knowing them. Just don't make them a statistic. Yes, you do understand what some of the statistics are of their community. That's important in understanding cultural competency issues. But I'll give you an example. I had one young man. We had an experience 2 summers ago. We had a lot of murders We constantly have shootings in the communities in which we work, but in this one summer we had a lot of murders occur in the community. You can have a murder happen on one street, but the trauma that it creates is vastly different amongst the people who live on that street. And it has everything to do with what their relationship is to that murder. And I'll share this in closing when I share an experience of one of our young people. We had a shooting. Of course, on the news, it was gang related. No, it was not gang related. It was personality difference related. Because all the people knew each other, the same community. But there was a dispute, there was an argument, and someone was killed. And they were laying there. So the next day the kids come to our program, and we need to, deal with it, because schools don't talk at all about what the kids face. It's like we're going to play like this doesn't happen. And school is a major place that kids interact on a daily basis. When they come home, their parents are worn out. Often they don't deal with it, or ways in which they deal with it is through their own issues of trauma. After school program is one of the few places that can help them critically analyze and deal with and cope. You don't have, in suburban environments, you have traumatic things happen. You have a flood of trauma people being sent to those schools. Well, in communities where it happens on a daily basis, you don't have any social workers or mental health people or great world-renowned psychiatrists being flown in from across the country to help this community deal with something that they deal with on an ongoing basis. So it's our program. But we have it happen in our program, and we're talking about it in the middle school kids. Their mouths are running like this. Ooh, I heard this person was involved. Well, this is over there. That's how you know what happened. It'll tell you everything. Right? There are many recorders and communicators of everything that happens in their community. But there was one 8-year-old. It was really deep because you're dealing with trauma. This little 8-year-old guy, it's really touching, kind of moves me when I think about it. And really, Dr. Perry, as he was very graphic in what he was sharing. Sometimes we face things that we don't even, in our running to meet productivity, that we don't even deal with. But Dr. Perry yesterday brought it back and had me, once again deal with it. And I had kind of forgot my emotional relationship to it. But I can visually see him. He was so quiet. And he was sitting there and he was like, I saw it. I sat and looked at the body out from my window. And he was just really quiet, really calm. But he just gave a real visual representation of what that body looked like laying there. And you're in a program, you got 20, 30 kids, 2 or 3 staff, a lot is happening. But for me and this kid, everything just kind of stopped. It's kind of light on the two of us having this interaction. And he said, yeah, my grandmother, that was her cousin. And they talked a lot in my house about how they're going to respond to this killing. Who's going to do what, in retribution. And he's just so calm, talking about this experience that he had. But he is experiencing this in a traumatic way, that a kid in the house next door whose family is not involved in those type of activities, whose family is structured and organized and going in a particular direction. Same neighborhood, same street. But the trauma that this is causing him is a lived reality that may be going on in his household for as long as this event and this retribution and this lifestyle is occurring. So how he's drawn into it, what he sees in his place and how it develops his self-concept is vastly different than those. So there are so many needs for us not to work together across mental health and across departments. There are so many people serving our communities that we really need to do a better job, I think, of working together. And the last thing that I'll say, on that is that you have to, and I have a slide here that talks about things that you need to do to really build relationships with communities. There are more things than that, but you need to be able to do those things. If you can't and you serve the community, there's a problem. But we also have to have advocacy. And advocacy needs to go both ways. It needs to come from state departments. It needs to come from the federal government. It needs to come from county boards. But it also needs to come from community-based providers. Any of you all who are out, community-based providers, you need to show up at OhioMHAS. You need to voice the concerns of your community, even if it's uncomfortable. You need to keep bringing it up. If you represent a part of social services that's underrepresented at a lot of tables, then I'm sorry, you have to keep bringing prevention up. But you have to show how we can build relationships. There has to be a larger investment. There's not as much advocacy for the communities that we serve as there used to be, and there needs to be more. And I'm not saying you have to come up and turn over tables and pound on tables, but you have to make sure you drive the point across because the community really needs it. So with that, I'll finish.
I have a question.
Yes.
I was really surprised when you said that there was nothing, given the amount of violence in the community, that there was nothing the school was offering.
Yeah.
Is that because of the school, or is that because, it just surprises me. Because as, by contrast, up in Dublin, there's a suicide and everybody's there doing trauma therapy, or a lot.
If it would happen on school property during school, maybe, yeah, you'd have the people that would come and the media and so forth. But if it happens 200 yards away, 30 minutes after school ends, no.
Is that because the school officials don't see a relationship, or there's no social service agency willing to work with the school? I don't get it.
Well, I don't get it either. And let's say we don't get it. Let's say it's wrong, but it does come from those institutions not having a strong relationship with the community. I'm a community-based provider. I'm one of the lowest funded of all the providers that serve this community, and yet on a daily basis, we're the few agencies that we see walk around and interact in the community on a daily basis. Us and some of the other, prevention or community-based providers. We do have some, mental health funding that's community-based work and so forth, so you will see a little from some others. But a lot of agencies just don't reach out into the community and interact.
That's right.
And so that's an emerging theme we've heard from Ms. Walker and now from Mr. Comedy. Relationships are key, absolutely key. I know many of you are working with local program areas. Establishing that local area, that relationship is kind of key to people trusting and then using the services that you provide. So, I would encourage you to continue to grow and foster that. So with that, I'd like to introduce our next speaker. Her name is Robbie Brandon.
Sunlight Village, like he said, is a nonprofit corporation. It's a ministry. Started in 2006. We were incorporated as a nonprofit in 2008, and our whole focus is we want to create a viable and stable community service program here in Montgomery County focused on improving the mental health for our youth and young adults. On the next slide, it talks about our mission and our vision and our value and beliefs. Over the past 4 months, we've been going through strategic planning, because when we opened our doors, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a minute, when we opened our doors, we opened a can of worms. We provide services to youth and young adults. That was our target, but we realized that we have to be a little bit more comprehensive. Even though we thought we were comprehensive, we didn't realize just how much more we needed to expand our services. But our goal now, our mission now, is to provide comprehensive youth, family, and family-focused mental health services that promote healthy communities. We took our vision and tightened it up a little bit to soar as a kite, which is lifted by initiatives that enhance wellness and empower youth and families. We believe in fostering excellence through quality service, power of the family and extended family. We believe in mental health, wellness, recovery, and dignity, hope, faith, trust, diversity, and multicultural competency, as well as the well-being of our youth and their future. Our youth are our future. And sometimes I think about, when I get older, who's going to take care of me? And it's kind of scary if you think about it right now. Who we are. I had mentioned that we started in 2006, became a nonprofit in 2008. We had been serving the community as professionals. We started out, a group of us who were working in mental health and community services, and we just kind of came together to address the issues that we seen at work. And so we started doing things like support groups in the libraries for mental health, for youth and young adults and their families. And we got things like veterans. We got people coming in who are grandmothers raising their grandkids. We got teachers coming in. So we had a plethora of other professionals and people, and we didn't have very many youth. So we had to step back and take a look at what are we doing, how are we missing the population. And we weren't missing the population, we were actually taking care of caregivers who were dealing with young people. So we fine-tuned that a little bit, and we kept doing our support groups, and we thought we'd expand to conferences. So we put on 2 mental health conferences, one in 2008, one in 2011. And it was supported by the Commission on Minority Health. And we had people come in from all over the state to talk about mental health. We provided CEUs for counselors and therapists. Teachers were welcomed, and the school board provided a continuing education units for the teachers. So anytime we could get in front of people to talk about mental health and let them know what we learned and what we've seen being on the ground, it was a wonderful opportunity. But our board basically told us we had to get our business together and start really providing services, because we couldn't get any funding. We were just a group of people who were doing good work in the community. Even though we were a nonprofit and recognized by the state and government, we still were just a nice group of people who were doing work in the community. So on April the 29th, 2013, we opened our doors at the Job Center Mall in Dayton, Ohio, which we picked the location for convenience. And because as a ministry, I was put in West Dayton. I was put in that area, and that's where I'm going to serve till the day I die. So on April the 29th, we opened our doors, and we do therapeutic services, counseling and therapy. We do billable services, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that. We do referral services. We refer just as many families to other services as we do treat them ourselves. Our focus, like again, is youth and young adults and their families. No youth or young adult is turned away. We don't care if you don't have any money. We don't care where you come from. We don't care what the situation is, but no youth and young adult is turned away based on economic or social status. We see all kids. Excuse me. Why we're here. I had mentioned before, we started focusing on transitional age youth and young adults. That's 14 to 25 years old. And that we chose that gap because that's the age of, if a child is coming from mental health, from the children's mental health system, and they're transitioning into the adult mental health system, that's where your biggest gaps were.
That's right.
That's where you see the diagnosis even change. That's where you see the lack of support and the lack of education for families. That's where you've seen that biggest gap. And that's also where we've seen a lot of our youth and young adults incarcerated. According to the World Health Organization, mental health problems such as depression account for nearly half of all disability among young people between the ages of 10 and 24. And I hope you all realize that one of the biggest deficits in our country, one of the biggest healthcare deficits in our country is mental health. It costs our country billions of dollars, and we're right up there with cancer and hypertension. We're right there with those three, diabetes. 70% of the youth in our juvenile justice system suffer from some type of mental, emotional, or behavior concern. And what we found is this is what I stress the most, is in our work we found that mental illness weaves through all this. It weaves through poverty. It weaves through the juvenile justice system. It weaves through unemployment, poor health, poor outlooks, poverty, violence. It weaves through all that. It weaves even through infant mortality. We're looking at pre-conceptual work, stress, anxiety, and how we can work with that. We have to tie all that in, and we have to realize that mental illness is a real illness, and we can't look at it any longer as something that we put on the back shelf. It's got to be in the forefront. But I was working with a youth that was diagnosed with major depressive disorder, and he was on his way to the adult prison, the adult system. And I tried to pull him to the side to talk to him, and he basically said to me, "Miss Brandon, I don't know why we're even talking. My life is black." When you have a 16-year-old tell you that their life is black, and you have no connections to the community mental health services for this child, we know there is something major missing. So we had to look at how we could incorporate services that were already in existence in the juvenile detention center and services that were outside and become advocates to pull those services in. We have to include the parent in that. We have to find out what services did you have, what services didn't you have, and how can we improve on what you did have. How can we complement each other to make sure that these kind of gaps don't go, that these kind of gaps go, they don't go unfilled. So to me, kind of some of the things that's holding us back, not only the lack of education and awareness, but the major issue we have with stigma. I put on here on my slide, future and current providers and educators. Why did I do that? Because I'll start with an example. At a local hospital I was working at, there was a young man, African American, hair all over his head. He was in his room. He was 19. He was in his room and he was ranting and raving, waving his hands. And I watched the residents go, what should we do? Are we going to do Haldol? Maybe we should look at Risperdal. Maybe we should, they're coming up with this plan. And I'm listening to it. I'm like, hold on, wait a minute. So I go in there and I talk to him and I'm like, what are you doing? He said, Miss, I got a new rap. You got to hear my new rap. I said, boy, you going to sit yourself down. You're going to be taken care of in the wrong way. So that just shows a lack of education and understanding not only of African Americans, but of the culture. We have a youth and young adult culture that our providers need to be aware of. So because his hair was half French braided, he didn't have anybody to finish French braiding his hair. Because his way of expressing himself was through rap, he was in his room, he was expressing himself. But meanwhile, if the providers didn't know the culture of where this young man came from or what he was about, they were going to medicate him. So we have to make sure that those that are coming out of schools to provide work in our communities are cultural sensitive, not only to the African American community, but also to our youth and young adults. They need to learn what Gothic is, what is going on with the weaves and the braids and the jewelry. We've had people say to me in our nonprofit organization, well, why would we serve them for free? She's got on jewelry, she's got her nails done, she's got her hair done. Why are we giving them free service? Do you have any idea if her sister did her hair? Was that ring left to her from her grandmother? Does she have to get rid of everything to have services from us? I'm not saying that every person we see is honest and open about their services, but it's not our business. It's not our issue. If we're here to provide service, non-biased service, then that's what we need to do. We need to be open to the culture of people that we're serving. And you can talk to people. You'll be surprised what kind of things you can resolve with just a conversation. I truly believe in educators, in training teachers, and what the importance of mental health is. And I'm going to comment on Mr. Comedy's comment. I was working in a school and as a contract nurse, and we had a young man shot in the community. He was on the basketball team. And immediately my thing was to gather up some of the psychologists or therapists that I work with and have them come to the school. And when I presented that to the school, they told me, it's okay, he didn't die. That to me shows a severe lack of understanding and knowledge in the education system about mental health. So when you deal with children in a school who are taking medications and using drugs and who have a real high incidence of IEPs and learning disabilities, and nobody's looking, and lots of violence, nobody's looking at the mental health of our children, then we've got a problem. There was a young lady there, and when I talk about parents and guardians and caregivers, in that same school, there was a young lady who overdosed, took a handful of medications, all the pills that were in her bottle, and we called the father in, and the father refused to take her. He wanted to take her to the church. He said she was attention seeking. We have parents that think when their children turn 21, the hormones will be okay, and they're going to be fine. They were talking to the ducks under the bridge. It's hormonal. He was hiding in the garage every day after school. It's hormonal. It'll be okay when he turns 21. That's a true lack of education in our community to the parents and the caregivers of our children. As a parent of a child who struggles with mental health issues, as a professional, there were lots of things that I missed because I was too close to her. She was my spoiled brat. So if I can miss it as a healthcare professional, then can you imagine the things that parents miss when they see their children doing bizarre things, or when they see their children pulling off to themselves, not being able to connect and make friends? If we don't educate them on signs and symptoms and things to look for, then they're going to continually be missed. So one of the things that we do at Sunlight Village is it's very, very important for us to get in front of people and talk and tell our stories and talk about the importance of educating ourselves and our families on what mental illness looks like. And at first, even when we started our organization, we didn't want to use the term mental illness because we didn't want to scare the people that we serve. And we thought, no, why would we hide it? We need to bring this out. Mental illness is just like anything else. If you broke your arm, would you go see about it? If you had diabetes, would you go see about it? If your child was losing their hair or had a laceration of the eye, you go see about it. Well, the brain is the major organ that runs the body, and that's what we try to educate parents about. You have to take care of that child's mind. You have to make sure that you're aware of when his behaviors aren't what you think that, there's no norm anymore, but when things are a little bit off kilter, you need to be able to see that and at least be able to have someone in your corner or someone you can call and say, hey, look, can I make an appointment or can I talk to somebody? There's no professionals in the schools anymore. There are no clinical professionals, clinical psychologists in the schools. There's educational psychologists and things like that for IEPs, but there's no one in there who, if a child is acting bizarre or if a child is severely depressed and crying in the classroom, that we can actually take the kid to and have them sit down and who can competently address their issues. We need to educate our youth and young adults. We need to let them know that it's okay if you feel sad, if you feel really down, if you haven't slept in a couple of days. It's okay to talk to somebody about that. If they don't know norms, we've got some kids who have no idea what it means to have a normal lifestyle. We have young people who are raising their siblings and no one's in the house. We have young people who come in whose parents, we had a young lady who come in who was referred to us by the courts, and her mother basically said, you got 15 minutes of my time. I got other things to do and this is her problem, not mine. So to that kid, she sat there just as quiet. This is normal for me. That's not normal for me. And that shouldn't be normal for anybody. So the child should be able to have an avenue, or if they even had an inkling of that it's okay. It's okay to talk to somebody about the fact that, you want to use drugs to not think about, all the issues you have. It's okay to say, I want to talk to you because I haven't slept in 4 days. It's okay to say I eat just to make myself comfortable. You have to have people in place for young people to talk to so they can know that you have an option. You have another option. Let us help you understand what you're dealing with and then give you solutions, positive solutions to address them and deal with them. Churches and youth serving organizations, this is a big one for me. We have to increase education and awareness about mental illness in our churches. When we started Sunlight Village, we approached everybody. Now, mind you, when we opened our doors, it was different from when we were just in the community. When we opened our doors, we wanted to talk to everybody and let them know we were here, what we were trying to do. We thought we'd get open arms. Come on, tell us what's going on. They were like, no. Our African American kids have enough stigmas. They don't need any more. And we thought, okay. So we continue with our work, continue doing what we do. And every day we face another issue with youth serving organizations and churches. I was invited to come and talk about depression to a local church. And I was sitting in the back, waiting on my turn to speak, and a young man came through the back door, and he sat in the back with me. And the church leader said, you need to come up here and sit with the rest of the kids. And he was like, no, I don't want to. He had on sunglasses, and he sat back. He said, no, I don't want to. The church leader said, you need to come up here and you need to participate. You need to come up here and sit down with everybody else and you need to participate. And the young man said, I don't want to. Can I just stay back here? And so I'm listening to the conversation. And so the youth leader came back and approached him and he said, you really need to come and join the group. So the young man got up and walked out. So I go after him and I'm like, I'm trying to explain to him, all he wants you to do is to be be inclusive. That's what the church, that's what his thing is he wants you to be part of the group. And so I started asking him, what is it that's bothering you? What is it? Why don't you want to be a part of the group? And he said, my dad dropped me off at this church. My brother died yesterday, and everybody's trying to deal with it. And they expect me to sit in the church and deal with it. And I thought, we lost complete sight of what this child could possibly be going through because we want to put our rules and regulations on them. This young man lost his brother to death. The family was trying to cope with it, so they thought since he was so distant, sticking him in a room with a bunch of other young people would help him. It might have if he was welcomed. So we talked in the lobby for about 10 minutes. Then he brought him back. He sat with me for a little bit, and I told the youth leader that I had him. In 15 minutes, the young man had his glasses off, and he was sitting with everybody else. He just needed to feel like somebody understood what he was going through. And it's okay if kids come in and they just don't want to participate right away. But if we have an organization that's youth serving, we have to be open-minded and open-hearted to what they've been through. We have no idea what some of these youth have gone through within the past 24 hours, let alone in their lifetime. I've seen kids kicked out of rec centers because their pants weren't pulled up. I've seen, and I have a thing about that too, but there's a way that you can approach somebody. Get out of here unless you're gonna pull your pants up. So the young man leaves. He goes outside, he gets approached by security. Security pisses him off, he throws a rock through the window of the rec center, and he goes to jail. Because somebody didn't say, man, there's ladies in here. We don't want to see your underwear, pull your pants up and then go in there to the gym. That we have to learn as parents, providers, churches, youth serving organizations, that this is not 1960. This is a whole new day, and we have a whole new generation of young people with a whole new set of issues and problems that we have to learn to address before we can even begin to help them get better. Before we can even help them heal, we have to learn and be a little bit more understanding about what they're going through. And I see it every day, so I don't expect everybody to know and understand this. But if we're going to serve the community, there should be a desire to understand the people that you're going to serve. Not enough organizations working together collectively to close gaps in services for youth and young adults. We had tons of organizations in Montgomery County, in the inner city, the West Dayton, that serve kids, and they do great work. Mentoring, tutoring, all kinds of stuff, working with high risk and at-risk youth. But it was hard to put our hands on each other. We serve youth and young adults who are struggling with mental, emotional, and behavioral concerns, and I might want to find a mentor. I might want to find a tutor. So I would call and they said, well, we only service kids in the 45417 area. And I'm like, well, this kid was incarcerated and now he's living with his aunt in another area. We can't serve him. We only serve kids between the ages of 5 and 14. Well, she's 15. So what we've done through Sunlight Village is create the round table discussion for youth serving organizations. It's a long title for bringing people back together to talk about what we do. And a lot of the organizations like, look, I'm tired of meeting, I don't want to meet anymore. But this is a discussion so we can learn what each other is doing and then connect, share phone numbers, share projects, share things that's going on so we can address the issues of our youth and young adults and those struggling with mental illness. Because we can't fix a child. You can't bring them into counseling and therapy and then send them back home to the same environment, to the same people, to the same services and think that he's going to be okay, he or she's going to be okay. It's not happening. So us coming together as a collective body helps to be able to say, I can pick up the phone and go, Raphael, I'm sending so-and-so over to you. Expect him. And then he'll say, okay, no problem, because he knows who I am. We may work together once a year, but we should be able to have that open line of communication to serve the kids that we are all dealing with. Because we're all in Montgomery County, we're all dealing with the same kids. We all have the same problems that we're trying to address. Then the other thing is too few programs addressing prevention and overall wellness. I had mentioned before that stress, anxiety, depression does exist in our children and our youth, especially in the African American community. When I was working in the juvenile detention center, so many of those youth and young adults would shut down. They'd come in and get their assessments, and they wouldn't talk. Or they say, I'm fine. They wouldn't talk, they wouldn't say anything. And then the next day, they're smearing poop all over the window. Or they're throwing themselves on the floor, or they're banging their heads on the window. And then the crisis team will come in. But we have to understand that we have to start looking at things and find out what's going on in the community, what's going on with our children's lives, and what's going on with the people that are serving them, so that we can try to address those. We even talked about infant mortality in the African American community. You all know Montgomery County, Dayton, Ohio is like number 50. We're the worst. We're the worst. 3 times as many African American babies are dying as Caucasian. Why? Depression, stress, all these things increase your cortisol, your hormone levels, causes changes in the body. These body changes cause premature birth. Premature birth equals small birth weight babies, which oftentimes turns into death. So we need to start looking at upstream things, and we cannot leave mental illness out. We need to start looking at what is causing the stress and the anxiety and the depression in our African American mothers, teen mothers, that's causing all these other problems. We have to look at why is there so much violence in our community? Why isn't somebody doing wraparound services? Why aren't somebody addressing these kids when they're in the ER and they're talking about, the families are around them talking about, he got shot, I'm going to go out and I'm going to kill his brother and his mother and his sister and his uncle. Why is nobody addressing that anger? So as Sunlight Village grows and develops, and this is what I'm saying, when we open Sunlight Village, we opened a can of worms. Because we realized that the kids we serve had multiple layers of problems and issues that we had to take a look at. And a lot of them were just dealing with wellness. If they knew how to be well, how to eat healthy, how to understand that my depression or my anxiety is mine, but I can get help for it. If they understood that exercise is not bad, watching TV 7 hours a day is terrible. You know, if they learned some of those things, we have them on TV, we got commercials, we got things all the time. But you think, how many commercials based on how to eat fruit and vegetables versus how many commercials from McDonald's and Burger King? Okay, so we have to connect as a community and get in there and get to talking to them. Put boots on the ground right there in the inner city. Sunlight Village, one of the things that we want to do is, have you ever heard of settlement houses back in the day? We're looking to do one of those in our area, where kids can drop in, young people can drop in. We used to mentor young men coming out of juvenile correction until the funding got cut. We were getting, and they're always telling me to watch my words, we were getting, say, around $84 a month to service a youth coming out of juvenile corrections. It costs almost $170,000 for them 1 year in juvenile corrections. Funding got cut. We had a really good rate of success. We only had 25 young men. One was killed 1 month after he was released. Some of them, maybe 3 of them returned. But the 80% of them were out within a year. That's opposite of what the data shows. Data shows that 80% of kids coming out will be back in jail within a year. Ours was just the opposite, 80% were out. But the mentors that we had, and we didn't have many men, it's hard to get African American men to mentor young men. But the mentors we had were looking at things like, do you have a driver's license? You know, at first we thought, we'll get them out, we'll mentor, we'll go to games, we'll go to plays, we'll introduce them to new experiences. These young men came out with issues beyond belief. They were sleeping on their grandmother's porches. They couldn't get back in the house because of what was going on in their lives. They had 6 kids. They had all kind of things going on. They didn't want to go play basketball. So we had to start looking at ways to really help to connect and build services around their mental health, their wellness, their family's health, and then connect them to services that will support that. Also, the other thing was too few conversations with our African American youth. We always want to put programs in place as professionals and leaders in the community. We need to start talking to our kids. We did a conversation with some young men, and this is something that Sunlight Village takes great pride in. We're talking to young people in our community and asking them, what can we do to help you? You'd be surprised. We ask them, are you depressed? Do you suffer from depression, or do you suffer from anxiety? They go, no, not me. But when we ask them, are you sad more than 2 or 3 days a week? They go, yeah. what's stressing you out in your life. They can give you a whole list of them. So we have to watch our terminology. We have to talk to them, build programs and services based on what their actual needs are. And that's exactly what we're trying to do. We have to address what their needs and what their barriers are, not the ones that we perceive they have. Where do we go from here? I know I got a few minutes. But one of the things that Sunlight Village wants to do is comprehensive programs and services. And when I say comprehensive, we can't do it all. That's where the partnerships come in. But we can be connected to the community, and we can be connected to the kids we serve in enough way to know that what we need to do to help them in a positive way. Like for instance, we're doing a parent coaching program. In Montgomery County, the school system is, some of the majority of the schools in the inner city are rated a D or F on the school report card. We've chosen one school that is not only in D and F, but is majority African American, 100% impoverished, and flunking just about everything. Also, the kids are being expelled and suspended from kindergarten to 3rd grade for things like intimidation, behavior, threats. You know, how kindergartner threaten you and make you want to put him out of school? But it's happening, and it's happening in alarming rates for African American children. So we got a parent coaching program which is supported by the African American Community Fund, Wright State University, a few other professional psychologists. They're actually going into the school, doing a 10-week parent coaching program for some of the kids that are having the most problems, and they're teaching them how to parent, how to communicate with your child, what does development look like at this age, safety, how to communicate with the school. They're teaching them behavior things that can help them address the issues that their children are seeing, and they're also letting them know that if your child does need help, then these are where you can go to get the help. Multi-generational strategies. We realize that we can't just address the child. We have to look at the mother or the grandmother or the aunt or the uncle or the neighbor or whoever now is the caregiver for this young person. And we have to look at their lifestyles and try to build our programs that'll encompass everybody. We need to look at other things other than just, their mental health status, what's causing them to be, struggle with this mental health issue. Now, I'm not saying bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, those things, they require some major intensive services, and we're not neglecting that because we want to put programs in place. We have services, we have connections with providers in the community. So if we pick up a phone and we have a kid that is having some major issues, that's where we can call and send them to. Economic development. As a nonprofit, when we first started applying for funding, we were literally told mental health is not sexy. Funders want to see results, and it takes years to see results for a kid that is struggling with mental health issues. For instance, we had a young man come in, and his parole officer referred him, and we were doing services for him for free. Because when they leave juvenile detention, you have insurance for 30 days. His grandfather was getting custody of him because his mother was all in the news for all kind of stuff. But the grandfather took him 90 days to get insurance for that young man, but we've seen him for the entire time. How we survived? Grace of God. But we've seen him for the entire time. We didn't hear anything else from him, but the PO called us and he said, "Thank you so much." That young man is now working in a trucking company, and he has his own trucking route. That's the reason why we continue to do what we do on a shoestring budget. But we have to, in a community, we were looking for data. I mean, we were thinking, when you go out and you think mental health, with everything that's going on, everybody's going to welcome us, everybody's going to just throw money at us. Not at all. Because we're a new entity with not a lot of backing and things, everybody was like, well, you got to get a little history under your belt. You got to get some money under your belt. So we do billable services, but do you realize that in most of the insurance companies, the private insurance companies have a $3,000 to an $8,000 copay for behavioral health. So we see kids for free because nobody else is going to see them for free. When I say we don't turn anybody away, we don't turn anybody away. Now, if they have something, then we have some partners that will take their insurance and we'll send them. But if we have a partner, we say we got a kid who's got another $2,000 to go on his deductible. She's like, Robbie, we can't service them, so of course we see them. We've got young people who catch the bus and come for anger management, whose parent has never walked in the door to fill out the paperwork. So we see them for free. Now we do get reimbursements, and they do come when they feel like it, but we continue to see our kids for free. And this is the way we're going to continue to do for Sunlight Village until things change. We have to be a voice in our community. We have to let them know that we have to be in here. We've got kids that come in who are struggling with depression, anxiety. We have a young man who was actually schizophrenic. And the parent did everything she could, took him to behavioral, rehab and all that kind of stuff. That wasn't where she needed to be. So we had to connect her to the right services. Even though she was getting services, she wasn't acknowledging her child's real issue and concern. So data collection is important, community collaboration is important, and first and foremost, we must not lose sight of what our purpose is in the community. So with all that said, we want to complement existing services. We don't want to compete. And the thing I like the most is we want to make a footprint in our community that our youth will want to step into. And on the last page, this is the reason why I do what I do. Not only for my babies, but for everybody else's kids in the area. So thank you very much.
I have a question. Any challenges, and this is to everyone in attendance, but certainly to you as well, any challenges with sharing information, engagement that you've been seeing so far in the work that you do?
Just to follow up, we do see a disparate rate of HIV infection within the African American community, and also an attempt of retaining somebody in care. And part of that also, as I lead towards the question, revolves around men who have sex with men and the African American community's cultural perception of the GLBT community. So I'm just kind of wondering, what's the pulse of the African American community's sense of acceptance of GLBT? Where are they at now, and where are you guys looking to how that can become a more accepted fabric of your community?
Can I answer that for my generation? For my generation, it's like 50-50. Either you accept it or it's getting shoved down your throat. Like in my day, we got kids coming to high school, males in dresses, high heels, Everybody's making fun of them, but they don't care, They're still doing it, So it's just like, we just don't accept it at all. But then there's kids who take on that, and then they just like, it's like all in our face, from TV to movies to kids in school, and they're one of the kids that you really can't really pick on them per se, because they're really protected, if you get technical, like they got, they can turn into a hate crime, So it's just like, we can't really like express how we totally feel about it, but we're still not accepting to that. Like on the men's side, like when you want to talk about the high-risk youth, now you got a whole bunch of high-risk youth who are homosexual, and then you got the high-risk youth that are undercover per se, and then it's the other ones who just don't accept it per se, because it's just, being institutionalized and not being in the community, they become like that and stuff like that because of hormones, but it's still, when they come out, they don't accept it, so they get the AIDS, and then they don't want to talk about it, It's like all that stuff, so it's just...
Yeah, I'd just say that was a great presentation, because you hit it in a nutshell. I will say that we've had some diverse sexual relationships in our after-school programs in the inner city African American community that many of us who grew up in African American communities weren't exposed to. And for our staff, we have to get trained on dealing with diverse sexuality, diverse sexual relationships, because times have changed, and our cultural understanding of that and how it affects our community is something that we have to grow into. But the problem with the larger community, often when you reach out for training, they're not culturally competent with our specific communities. So their advocacy for inclusion doesn't fit a model that really affects, and they don't have membership from our community. So that's an issue. So who we have to reach out to. I did a sustainability review for a program in St. Louis. They had I think it's a Robert White grant for HIV. They did medical work and training, and they worked with African American homosexual community there. They had their own distinct culture, but their staffs came from that community or had large interaction in that community. And I think that cultural competency is important for many of us service providers. But when he brought up, you also have the situational homosexuality that comes out of the prison system. People are not seeing it, even if you're engaging in it. Life that we engage in doesn't have to make sense. So I can engage in behavior that fits in the institution, but not be part of the overall cultural reality when they get out of the institution. And as a matter of fact, the stigma around it is so negative for them that they would actually actively act against it. And you have to understand that mindset that the young man brought up. I had a young man that came out of our program, went to prison. One of the first books he wrote while he was in prison was about that very issue, about that duality of experience that they have. They're very hyper heterosexual when they get out or before they go in, but their experience, homosexual experiences in, are distinctly different. And their ability to navigate those two worlds causes mental health issues within itself.
I just want to, I can't speak from the male perspective, but I think their perspective may be a little different than the way women look at this issue. I think, and I don't want to suppose that's overgeneralized, but I think what I see in the African American community is mostly the fear of AIDS, the fear of HIV. It's like, you get it, you're gonna die. And I think when you're talking about HIV and AIDS, whether it's through a homosexual relationship or through a blood transfusion, or you get it because your partner brought it home to you, it's fear. And the stigma of having AIDS is because everybody's mind goes to, oh, it was homosexual. That's just my take on it. And that stigma, let me take it back to mental illness, because mental illness has that same type of stigma that keeps people from going to get the treatment early on until it gets to a point where it's just about irreversible.
Exactly.
And just to throw this in there as well, when I was a young adult, you used to have an industry. Thank you. Yeah, the people I serve don't feel that way. Thank you. But what's the industry that used to do the best job at fighting against HIV in the African American community? Going back maybe in the 80s. Jimmy hat. Anybody know what that is? Wear your Jimmy hat. What industry promoted that? Yeah, and what industry was a big promoter of that?
Hip hop.
It was the hip hop community.
Okay.
So, and that's back before it became so large, but you had an industry, hip hop, everyone listened to, and that talks about environmental campaigns. They pushed and promoted on a continuous basis that, if you were a man and you were responsible, if you were going somewhere, if you believed in yourself, you were going to wear a condom.
Yeah.
You still might engage in a whole bunch of other negative behavior, sexual behavior, but you were going to wear a condom.
Yeah.
And that resonated with young African American men who listen to hip hop. Now that community has moved away from that, pushing that, and I have a treatment program. The vast majority of people in my treatment program are men coming out of the adult prison system, African American. 95% of them say they have sexual relations, they don't wear condoms. A lot of the communities pushing condoms aren't culturally adept at infusing it within their lived reality. So they're like, yeah, okay, that's these people that I might run into maybe at my agency or somewhere else, but they're not part of my lived reality. And we really need those institutional pieces like the music industry really to, begin pushing that again, because that was effective.
Yeah, nowadays they don't, in the music they talk about having intercourse without protection.
Yeah.
Like that's what this, it's a big thing.
Yeah.
Like, just do it without condom,
How are you? I know you already have a lot on your plate. but are you engaging the police in some of these issues, making them culturally competent? Has there been a reach out?
NAMI has pushed at the national level. CIT training started in Memphis, Tennessee some years back, but they have pushed CIT training because it has proven effective in teaching the police officers not just their interaction with African Americans, but that's really where a lot of it takes place, and that's crisis intervention training. So, I think at our state level, we have had a lot of emphasis now on not just police and police training, but we've had a lot of emphasis on mental health courts for people with mental illness to try to divert people. It's not that effective. I mean, it's effective, but it's not getting all of the people that are falling through the system, but it's to divert people from going into the jails, into the prisons, by giving them, through the justice system, a way of addressing the issues, criminal issues that they've been involved in. At the local level in Cincinnati, there had been CIT training, training for police officers. Then the budget got cut for a few years, as I understand. Our police officer, our police commissioner came from Columbus. Yeah, Blackwell, is that his name? Yeah. As I understand it now, he's doing some real neighborhood involvement, getting people working with different organizations, working with the different neighborhoods, and getting his police involved in the neighborhoods as well. So it's being addressed, but I got to tell you, back in 2000, when I first went on the NAMI National Board, we had, over a period of 2 years, 18 black males killed by police officers in a 2-year period of time. And I was just getting on the NAMI National Board, and they were talking about bringing a conference into Cincinnati. And I was like, well, I'll be out there picketing as a board member if you bring that into Cincinnati without making some kind of preparation or recognition of this really serious issue. And since that time, it has decreased. So it's being addressed. It's being addressed with NAMI, but we're not the only ones that are just doing that. Yes, ma'am.
I have a question. Going back through the history of the United States and how they treated Black America and how they unlawfully put them in jail and for ridiculous things, and because they got rid of slavery, so then because they couldn't do slavery and everybody was supposed to have rights, and they found other ways to put Black people in jail.
Jim Crow.
Exactly. So with that mentality of thinking, in my perspective, I don't think anything has changed. It's just, there's been a blanket over it. It's just, how do you change that? Like, why aren't we going in and changing that mentality with the police? Like, I did the crisis intervention trauma training. I don't think it's appropriate for, I mean, it's probably appropriate for de-escalation is appropriate.
Yeah.
But when you're a police officer and you've been trained the Jim Crow way, I don't see why we're not tackling that point of view, because I think that's still so embedded. You have generations of police officers, and I'm not bad-mouthing police officers. I think they're really great. I have a lot of friends that are police officers, but how can we get that mentality out of their head? Because I think, just my perspective, I think that's a big issue that is still going on.
That's a big question. I don't know how you can get that out without acting individually, each and every one of you speaking up. You know, I stopped years ago thinking jokes about blondes were funny, because jokes about blondes were jokes about people generalizing their behavior and can be painful. There are still jokes going on around about African Americans, people who are Polish, addressing someone's ethnic specifically and making jokes of it. I stop jokes like that, and I stop people who start telling you jokes like that, or who start putting down a group of people without addressing what their issues are. So I think that every individual has to speak up for something like that, because you have to change the culture of society, of this broader society that we live in, that has this broader culture that says it's okay to put down the African American population. It's okay to assume, and this is one you hear all the time from politicians, to assume there's only black women that's on welfare. When we know, when you get to the numbers, it's mostly Caucasian women. So, you know, and now I'm hearing the same thing about people who are Muslims, people who believe in Islam. I'm hearing stuff, you know, you hear stuff about people who are Jewish, and I think it is the only way you're going to change the society is if every individual in this society, or every individual in this room, stop it dead in its tracks and correct it.
And for those of you that may not know, there's a state governor's task force that's collaborating with the feds to do town hall meetings around the state, and it's about grassroots involvement and engagement. You know, at the local level, folks from the community engaging this process and really asserting the challenges that they're encountering through these interactions and what they believe is needed, and really staying engaged in that process and seeing it to the end. And then the flip side is those involved at the state and international level truly hearing that and working to implement new things and policies that could benefit the community. So it's that engagement and relationship building that needs to continue to happen, not just a one and done, not just 1 year, but it's a continuous engagement process. We're hoping that could help get at that.
Let me just address one thing that you said. You said nothing's changed. Well, I've been around here a lot longer than you. And I got to tell you, things are better than they used to be. They can get better. I'm not saying there are problems, but you can't just focus on it's not happening, because some things are changing, and things are changing for the better, even with the police department. You know, in Cincinnati back in 2000, we had the issues of African American males being killed who had mental illness, and they were killed because one of them might have had a knife, so they shoot him 40 times. One of them was walking around, if I remember this right, one of them was walking around in the middle of July with a big heavy coat on, a hat pulled down over his head, and he had a shotgun, and they shot him. Nobody thought this is unusual behavior. So people are learning, not just through CIT training, but I think everything is starting to impact what has taken place between the races. Is there going to always be racism? Yeah, just like there are people who are going to be Nazis, you know, or who are going to be anti-Jewish, or who are going to be anti, you know, anything. So I think there's always going to be that element, but you can't focus on that. There are good things going on, and I think sometimes you have to look at the good things, or you will just get lost in the fact that you think nothing is changing. So I just wanted to.
I'm gonna say one thing. Be quiet. One thing. Yeah, to address what you said, we have to look at that from a systems approach. I'm so glad we have all these task force and things coming on. But if you look at the number of African American and men who are incarcerated for nonviolent crimes, you have to figure out why we have so many men incarcerated because they don't have insurance. Or why do we have so many African American men incarcerated because they didn't pay their child support? Yeah. So I don't have to pay my child support. You take my driver's license, you put me in jail, I lose my license, I got $5,000 I got to come up with to get this straight, and then I got to get a job. So it's a systems thing, and you can't just look at it from the police, because the police are trying. I will say, I know in Montgomery County they are trying. But we have to go to the judges, we have to go to bigger pictures and address those things on a larger scale. And so we have to change policies. We have to get people aware of what is actually causing, you know, these incarcerations. We can see it down here, but we have to look at the changes that come from the top.
We'll take one more point, and then we have to get to our last speaker. We're running out of time. So.
Well, I'll hold that after him.
Okay. So with that, I'm going to introduce our last speaker, Raphael Weston. I'm really thankful that Raphael is here. He took this this event on such a short notice, but we know that he's really actively engaged in our youth and young adult work going on across the state with systems of care, so he really needs no introduction. I want to let him tell his story, and then we'll kind of go from there. Raphael?
Okay. I've been listening to all these people on the thing, and they said some great things. Like he said, I got this such last moment, so I didn't really get to prepare like I could have prepared, but I'm gonna speak on these issues that I wrote down from a youth perspective, and I try to write it in like a timeline so it could flow with my story, so it could relate. But they was making such key points, and the paper was so small, so you gotta bear with me. So, first of all, I was raised in Greenbrier. If anybody's from Columbus, Greenbrier was one of the most dangerous hoods in Columbus. Like, period, hands down, the police named my community Uzi Alley for all the deaths there. And my family who lived there, like my mom used to be like, why are you hanging out with them kids? And I'm like, because they're my friends. And my mom's like, with them they're lowlifes, and you don't come from that and stuff. And like, that's what the stuff was going on in my house. And like, for example, like my grandfather was he was an engineer in the Tuskegee Air Force. He was a Tuskegee Airman. He was an engineer. His brother was he was the first black mayor of Grand Rapids, Michigan. And we just have like this long history of like great stuff going on. So my mom was like, you're better than that. And I'm just like, what do you mean? These are my friends. Like we played in the same sandbox for a long time. I just don't see the different tiers. So that's one thing I was talking about, like with black culture, like just because they're all in the same community doesn't mean they all have the same values. You know what I'm saying? So, and then you gotta understand that the peers, like we set our own values, and whoever has the most strongest voice is going to dominate that community. You know what I mean? So I eventually, like growing up, let me get back on topic. Okay. So I was growing up in Columbus, Ohio, in Greenbrier. I have a phonetic processing disorder. And a phonetic processing disorder is where I read and write phonetically, picture form. So that's like hieroglyphics. You know what I'm saying? I don't sound words out. I see the sentence, I see the picture, and I can break it down like that. Now, when you're in school and you're dealing with African American culture, the majority of people who are going to jail in mental institution are black males. And where does their, I'm not going to say diagnoses, I'm going to call them labels. When did the labels start? In the school. Because the teacher can't deal with the kids. Most of the teachers, no offense, are Caucasian women who have, from the history of black men, from the first movies, we was demonized and over-sexualized. So that's the only thing they see is being an aggressor, sexual person. So they are quick to kick us out of class. You know what I mean? Well, I'm getting kicked out of class because I had phonetic processing disorder, and they're trying to teach me how, like, I don't understand it. Like, we all wear different shoe sizes, so why are we all learning the same type of programming? You know what I mean? So it's just like, they're trying to teach me exactly how everybody else is being taught, and when I start acting out, okay, he has opposite defiant disorder. He don't like to follow rules. So let's give him some medicine to like kick that out of him. You know what I'm saying? Well, that doesn't work. Now he's angry. Now he's got anger issue. Let's give him some more medicine. So time I got to being a senior in high school, I probably had over 10 diagnoses. Probably been on, I can't remember how much different medicines I was on from them trying to fix the problem. And the whole time I'm like, hey, I don't like this medicine. It doesn't make me feel good. I don't like this medicine. It don't make me feel good. Well, everybody else, all the adults, they're telling me what's going to work. Well, this is going to work. Okay, let's try it out. You know what I'm saying? So then nobody's listening to me. Nobody. They're telling me what it is. Like I'm saying, because y'all are adults and y'all going to tell us what to do. Because in the 60s and before that, you didn't have a right to have an opinion as a child. You know what I mean? So you just had, so that is going on in our culture. And when you're dealing with the image of black men, I'm trying to stay on topic. I'm sorry if I bounce on, because I have such sort of time. But when you're dealing with the image of black men, when we go to school, because it really starts in the home and in the school. When you go to school and you're learning about yourself. When in Black History Month, you're gonna learn about you're a slave.
Right.
You're a slave. They don't talk about the one of the black inventors who was Thomas Edison, master chief designer for all his patents. They don't talk about the black man who invented the light bulb. Nah. They talk about us in slavery, and then they give us a little bit of Martin Luther King. That's about it. So when you're in a community that has everybody saying you're a gang member, you're a gang member, you're a gang member, you know what I'm saying, on the news, gang violence, gang this. And then you come into high school. Okay, you want some new shoes, you want the new phone, you want a car. How you gonna get these things? Working at McDonald's? So all these people in this community is gonna work at the same McDonald's. Okay. There's no jobs in the community. So what do? We sell, we rob, and we create mischief. But if we had institutions or programs that trained us how to create our own jobs or create our own wealth or income and do things like that, we wouldn't be doing what the rappers tell us to do. Sell dope. Sell dope. Sell dope. I mean, I don't know what happened to the NAACP, but during the NWA era, they didn't allow them guys to call the women bees. Now it's like, we don't care. We got songs on the radio talking about it's okay to be a stripper. And we just sit back. You know what I mean? Blame it all on the youth. These kids, they're so crazy. But what about the adults who was there while we was growing up? You know what I'm saying? So when you got us looking at ourselves as gang members, you know what I'm saying? Because that's the only thing we see on TV. You know, the media, they don't like. So one time, my mom. Let me talk about the media. One time, my mom, she moved us to Dublin. We in Dublin. This kid broke into his, and first of all, they want to talk about black kids on drugs and inner city kids on drugs. That's a myth. We don't got the money to get high. Seriously, we don't have the money to get the dabbing that's on the news and all that fancy stuff. We don't got the money. We probably can get us a $5 blunt. Yeah, but when I went to the suburbs, I saw kids on cocaine. Yep. I saw kids on heroin. I saw kids taking their mommy's prescription drugs. You know, that's where the ODs come from. So this kid, because he was on cocaine, broke into his grandparents' house, stole over 20 guns. I'm talking about rifles, shotguns, and you know what I mean? For them to get them guns back, it was armored. It was like mobile homes, police stuff coming down the street. All types of cars. They had literally over 15 cop cars that swarmed on this house where everybody was chilling at, and they didn't get all the guns, but that was never on the news. They ain't talk about all them guns that was running around in Dublin streets. That never got on the news. But if I go do something negative, I'm on the news. If I'm from the inner cities, I'm on the news quick, fast, in a hurry. But y'all know I got an award from the governor for stopping kids from entering the juvenile system from the educational system. I got an award for that, but I ain't come on the news. But if I would have walked down there in front of that state house and shot one shot on the air, man, I probably would have hit national news. You know what I'm saying? So we're not even, like what they said, we're not even focusing on the kids that are actually doing things. We're not even making them the prime time. This is prime time, you know? And I'm sorry, let me stay with me. Stay with me. It's like, so mind you, from second grade, that's when I got my first label, and from senior year, I was in foster homes, group homes, mental institutions, drug rehab centers, everything. I was in there. And this is how they start. Hello, come in. We're about to do your intake. Was you molested? Was you abused? Okay. Y'all ask the same questions in every providing agency, the same exact questions. And y'all wonder why the kids don't want to do it. I've been doing this since 2nd grade. You didn't talk to the last person I came from? Right. How much do you really care? You know? And then, so we shut down. We don't want to deal with things. We don't want it. And now they want to talk about that we're on drugs and stuff like that. I didn't put myself on drugs. I didn't give myself sugar. I didn't isolate chemicals and take them out in nature and give them to myself. You know? I didn't give myself ibuprofen. I didn't give myself Tylenol, Adderall, Cetera, Focalin. We can go on and on. I didn't give myself all them drugs. The grown-ups gave me them drugs. So when I'm a child and I'm in 2nd grade and I haven't even hit puberty yet, y'all are training me to develop a craving for an outside presence to deal with what's going on the inside. So once I become 18, I'm fed up with everything. I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it. Everything looks the same. Nothing is working. I don't want it. I hate it. But now I have a craving, a chemical dependency on outside presence. So what do we get on? Cocaine. What do we get on? Heroin. What do we get on? All sorts of drugs. How about anger? Me right now, I'm addicted to anger. I never realized this until a couple months ago. People used to tell me all the time, you like to be mad. I'm like, yeah, right. Who likes to be mad? You know, I'm like, are you serious? But now I realize I am addicted to that rush, to that feeling. So when you're giving us all these medicines, instead of just talking to us like, hey, what's going on? You know you have the right to be mad right now. You have the right. Your uncle just died. You got kicked out. You just went into a shelter. You're homeless. Y'all ain't eating. You have the right to feel the things you're doing. I guarantee you, if I would have opened this presentation and said, how everybody doing here, every one of you guys would have told me I'm doing okay. But I guarantee you, half of y'all are not doing okay. There's something going on with half of you guys right now. But we're going to act like we're good. So because we're in a society that tells us that it's not okay to feel. You can't come to work mad. You can't come to work sad. You can't come to work depressed. You gotta leave all that at home. We don't care. You're on the clock, buddy. Leave it. So that comes into our cultures where when y'all ask me like, is everything okay? Yeah, everything's okay. Every time I see them ask my mom, is everything okay? And she can't even pay the bills right now. She says it's okay, so I'm gonna say it's okay. You know? So when you come into a child and you gotta make them understand that it is not wrong for them to feel the way they feel. But what is wrong is the way that you project that to the outside. Fighting, hurting yourself, self-sabotagement. And you know why the kids are self-sabotaging? Because we don't believe we're going to make it past 18. Right. And if you make it past 18, you ain't going to make it past 21. And if you make it to 21, you ain't going to make it past 25. So we counting ourselves out before we get even up there, and we trying to do everything as much we can before we die. We don't want to go to school. For what? They're not teaching me about me. You know, then let's get back down to this history thing about psychiatry. Now, one of the problems of the black community is we don't want to be black. We want to be white. And that comes down for the years ago of all the institutions that was based off of that. The father of psychiatrists saying that the problem with black people is leprosy and they need to be white. That's embedded into our culture.
Yes, it is.
You know? And let's get back to the eugenics movement. The eugenics movement, when they said people with mental health was undesirable and they was trying to ethnic cleanse. That was the term of the government. That's embedded into our culture. So when you have schools that have a pipeline to prison, period. The African males are the ones being targeted. I was in the conference where they showed the numbers where if you go to a small rural county with Caucasians, they're doing the exact same things that the inner city kids are doing, but they're not getting suspended. They're not getting suspended. You know what I mean? So when you got that going on, kids always getting in trouble, and then when they get in trouble, you want to call the police. I'm not mad at the police. I used to be when I was a kid, but when the police come, what he gonna do? Get on his walkie-talkie? Get on his billy club? Get on his gun? Get on his handcuffs? Them are the tools that we give them. So what else can they do? But to use the things that's their Batman belt. So Batman gonna go on his belt. We can't be mad. You know what I mean? We're not bringing in spiritual leaders to make the kids feel like you might be a rogue saint that fell off. But nah, you gonna bring in the police, and then when you get done, like, hey man, what the cops say? Man, he ain't say nothing. Oh, he's a bad boy now. You know, they ain't do nothing, slap on the wrist. You know, so once you get, and then, so I'm just giving you guys a variety of things that goes on in actual, like, black people's minds and stuff. You know, we really don't like ourselves. You know, the people that are handling us, from the teachers, from the police, they don't like us. You know what I mean? And it's not really so-called their fault. It's when they like I begin to debate with people sometimes, and it's not their fault. It's what they're taught. Like, you know what I mean? They're taught that they're so great and they done all this stuff, and the only thing we done was slavery. You know what I mean? So we gotta fix that type of stuff. We gotta fix the curriculums in schools, because all school curriculums don't fit all kids. And it all starts with the education. If these kids had hope to be successful, they wouldn't be so suicidal. Just because they're not cutting their wrists like all the other kids don't mean they ain't suicidal. Why did you go into the store without no mask and a gun? You know they got cameras. Do you really don't care? No, I don't care. I don't. They would tell you, I don't care. Am I lying? You did look at you like, I don't care. I don't care about myself right now. I don't care, because nobody around them is truly caring about them. Everybody's caring about themselves. How many kids am I going to save? Let me tell them what I think about them. Whoa! Really? You're going to tell me what you think? And another problem I have with the providing agencies, where so when I was going through my thing, going through all these different treatment programs, whatever, they got timelines on there. Like y'all said, it's a 7-month timeline. You know, that's what the grants, right? That's what they want. You know, 1 time a week. The kid's not going to open up to you guys until the 3rd or 4th session. Right. By that time, you only got 2 more. And then once them 2 more come out, you walk away. So now you want me to tell you that I was molested, I was abused, I was all this stuff, to a stranger who's about to walk away in 7 weeks, and they just told me they only going to be here for 7 weeks? I ain't about to do nothing in this program. Are we done yet? That's how they talk to you. That's how they treat you. Like, bro, why would I give you the most inner, deepest secrets of my life to a stranger who's going to walk away with them? Yeah, 7 weeks. That's not smart. That's not smart at all. So they're not going to engage in the treatment, because the treatment is not really helping. It's not helping, and I'm sorry to say it, because you can't help nobody with no 7-month program. I mean a 7-week program, because it didn't take 1 time out of a 7-week period for them to develop the issues that they have. And you expect it's going to happen like that? No. You got to stop coming at kids like, was you molested? No. What you guys got to do is, like they said, is build relationships. How are you doing today? You know what I mean? You're all right? Good. You're not all right? As soon as the day they tell you that they not all right, that's the day when you pounce. Because that's when they're opening up. You don't come in like, well, this is the program, and you know what I mean? We're going to do this intake stuff. You know, I got to have my data together for my funders, you know, to make them happy. You know, you got to do all that stuff. And the kids are sitting there like, man, this don't got nothing to do with me. This don't got nothing to do with my issues. You know what I mean? So when they get to be 18 and 24, they're just so turned off from the whole situation that they're going to end up in prison, because they have no education, no desire to get a job. Why would I go get a job there when I can go do this here and make so much money quick, and I can be able to have this and have that? Why would I do that? I'm not even going to see 25, so why would I go to college? Why would I go to college when I'm going to be dead at 21, 25? Why? I need to get this money as fast as I can, so I can buy this car as fast as I can, so I can have this lady as fast as I can, and be out of here as fast as I can, because I don't even want to be here anyway. Ain't no jobs in my community. The apartments, the low-income apartments, are beat down. The property manager ain't going to fix them. Their environment has no hope. You know what I mean? Like I don't know people from Columbus area, but East High area, look at it. All the jobs are out of there. It's one Wendy's in the whole community, one Subway, 2 gas stations. But how many people who live there? How are they supposed to go get jobs? Oh, by catching a bus and going to the suburbs 2 hours away in the winter and stuff? What? No, that's too much. I'm not on it. I'm not going to do it. What I'm going to do is stay in my community, get this money is the best way I know how. And how do I get money? The TV and the news, they tell me all the time, all I got to do is sell dope or strip, sell my body. You know, the parents, we gotta learn how to. And one thing about it is our laws are not comfortable for our community. Now y'all want to talk about gangs. Well, if I'm chilling with, I got my dude Pat. Me and Pat been cool since kindergarten. Then I got my dude over here. Me and him been cool since middle school. You know, Pat got his dude. You know, he been cool with him. You know what I'm saying? Now we're a gang. 3 or more in the group. We're a gang, so we can't even come together and do positive stuff without here comes the police. Hey guys, what are you doing? You know what I'm saying? Like that constant stuff. And then that guy just got shot. That guy just got raped. That girl we haven't seen her in months. You know what I'm saying? I guarantee you, more people die in the African American community than they do in the war. That's just my personal thing. I feel like we have the same type of issues. People dying in front of us. You know what I'm saying? We are dealing with serious issues in our community that nobody is taking serious, but they want to blame it on all this other stuff. But when it comes down to it, it comes down to self-hatred. We trying to be like people who are not going to accept us. You know what I mean? You're like, oh, if I want to talk intelligent, black people say like, oh, you're trying to talk white. What? Are we serious right now? You know what I mean? Like anything that's positive is white and anything that's black is bad. So, you know what I mean? So it's like, damn, that's bad to the bone, but bad is still good. So we glorify our bad things because we say, oh, that's bad. No, bad means bad. So why are we changing the definition of bad? We got to get back to teaching our children and using proper grammar and stop trying to switch things around because then they become delusional. You know? So I just want to say it's a lot of things why youth get turned off from the system. It's just not all that great. The hearts are in the right place. You know what I'm saying? I understand that you know, funders, they're only gonna give you the money if you come at them how they want you to come at them, and if you do the things they want you to do. You know, you got to hit their checklist, and then you could try to do the things you know that's really gonna help without getting in trouble. Like, can you go over a kid's house at 4 o'clock in the morning without getting in trouble? No. You call net care. But they don't know net care. Net care gonna come with the police. Then if the kids start acting like boo, 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 now what's gonna happen? Death, taser, we don't know. So there are protocols that stop providing agencies from really connecting with kids. Short time limits. You can't really deal with a crisis situation. You know what I mean? Things like that, we need to rethink, like, okay, what can we do to really make this kid feel like I'm here to help him? They be like, hey, what's your Facebook? Like, oh, I can't give you my Facebook. But you want me to tell you about my childhood? Okay. You know what I mean? We gotta change that. Like, oh, you know what I mean? You know where I stay, but I can't know where you stay? Oh, okay. I don't rock with her. I don't trust her. You know what I mean? I don't feel her right there. She want all this from me, but I can't get nothing from her. And I'm going to say her because males ain't in this field. You know? So I just want to you know, and one thing I love somebody say, like, you can't fix me. You can't fix me with the medicine. You can't fix me with the counseling. I got to fix myself. I got to believe I can do it myself. If I don't have no hope, I'm not going to do it. If I don't feel like I can heal, I'm not going to do it. You can't do it. And no matter how much heart, how good of programs, how much funding you got, if the youth do not believe that it is success out there, they're not going to fix themselves because you can't fix them. You know what I mean? If I have a code, you can't come into my body and cure me. No, my body is going to work that out itself. But we're not teaching our kids how to work out their problems. When they have issues, we're giving them a drug. That's what it is. It's a pharmaceutical drug. You know what I'm saying? And then we get mad at them when they turn to street drugs. At least the street drugs make us feel good. This stuff been making me feel like crap for years, and I keep telling you guys, and you guys just don't listen. You're like, well, this is your medicine. Well, we might put you on the next one. We got this new medicine coming out. We gonna put you on that. You know what I mean? But we don't really know how it's gonna work, though. You know what I mean? But yeah. You see where I'm coming from? Like, we gotta really come together. And one thing, y'all gotta come together, because everybody don't know everything. Like, it's too much. It's too much egos in the we gonna say healing world. We gonna say it's too many egos. These people want all the numbers. They trying to get all the youth. You know what I'm saying? They need their youth so they can keep their funding. You know what I mean? We gotta make sure we gotta have these amount of success stories. We gotta make sure, like, but nobody is like, man, forget the numbers. Like, all right, boom. These people got great transportation programs. Like, they can get all their youth here. You know what I mean? This program, they don't. How come they ain't working together? Like, okay, we got the programs that the kids are coming to. They like our presentations, they like our mentors, but we just can't get them here. How come people are not working together? Because they fighting over funding. If y'all stop fighting, if the government changes us fighting over funding, the egos will go away. I'm just going to end it with that, because like I said, I ain't really had that much time to prepare, and I just want to say, if y'all want kids to really take y'all's program serious and do y'all serious, you got to put hope on the inside first. You got to let them open up to you first. You don't come in and be like, oh, you about to tell me what's going on with you today. Oh, you're not? Okay, go to your room. Because that's what they all are. Most of all the residential treatment facilities, just a room in the hallway. Exactly like a pod in a prison unit. You know? So it's just like, you got to let them open up first. From that, like I said, like me personally, I have learning disabilities, mental disabilities, and I went to jail a whole bunch of times in my life, and that just comes back to them not understanding how to teach us. Like, how do we learn? Not how y'all learn, but how do we learn? What works best for us? Like, you know what I mean? Like, no shoe fits every foot, you know what I mean? So we gotta learn how to be flexible and have programs that can deal with particular people. We can't have everything such black and white, and if it's not inside these papers, then we can't do it. Like her program, she does what she can when she can. She don't be like, well, if you don't got insurance, we can't accept you because we need the funding, and you know, nah, we gonna come bring you in. You need it, come in. And that's and I'm just gonna end with that. No.
So, that really needs no follow-up. I think what Mr. Weston offered was something so real and brought to life a lot of what we heard from the other presentations. We have just a few minutes for questions. Anyone have any questions for him? Or any of our panelists?
Me, you gotta put all that in the book.
Actually, I'm working on my book right now. It's called Exile from Self-Destruction. So there it is. We're gonna just talk about, because a lot of issues is us just killing ourselves.
Yep.
Doing it to ourselves. Once I realized it's nobody's fault but myself, I understand things when I was a kid I couldn't control, but a lot of stuff is my decisions and my actions and my doing.
But when you are, if you're alone, we need to work in the surrounding, the environment, the people, the transportation, the teachers, and everything that's surrounding, even the way that we frame history and the messages that we convey. I applaud you.
Thank you.
Any other comments, thoughts, or questions?
I have a question. How old are you now?
I'm 24.
Okay. You just remind me of my son. He's 29, and he was out there, like, he was getting ready to go into the military, and he started acting up in the 12th grade. And I said, why are you acting up? There's a war going on out there, Ma. I don't want to go. I said, there's a war in the streets. You're getting you behind and you're going. He's been in there 11 years now with the Air Force, and he's an Air Force recruiter trying to help youth get into the service, because it is rough for youth. I have a soft spot because I was a single mom, and like I said, I have a soapbox. I got a crazy life too. Like you said, we come to work, we come in to get paid, but like you said, we all got issues going on. And if we just come in to make the money, to go home to those other issues and get up again, and it's a vicious cycle. And like you said, we all need to put the chain together to work together, but we don't. Because like you said, some people don't want to work with certain type of people. Some people, you know, like you said, it's funding issues. It's really sad, but I commend you in what you've done with your life to turn it around, because I did the correction thing for 20 years, and you know, I left corrections because I didn't see success stories. I felt like I was failing. Well, you know, it's no different at the Department of Health, but the point is, it's if you can see one person come out of the, I don't know if you went to prison, you didn't say that, you just said, you know,
I was,
when you said pod, I had a feeling.
I've been locked up probably over 20 times, but I never
went to the adult.
Because like I never had a felony. All my charges was
misdemeanors.
Family issues.
Yeah.
Fighting brothers. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Family turmoil. You know, unruly charges.
Right.
That introduced me to drug dealers. Like I said, my family was snobby, sedooty, uppity, whatever you want to call them. And when I went to jail, I'm like, God. Like, you know what I mean? So yeah.
But I commend you, and I'm glad you found yourself, and still looking, I'm sure, before you ended up in the adult system.
Thank you.
I'm proud of you.
Thank you.
And I want your information.
Okay.
For future speaking.
Okay.
Engagement.
And I want to bring back up a point too about police and just the structure of our society. You know, now that we have this opiate epidemic, if we compare how we approach the opiate epidemic with how we approached crack in urban communities, it's very different. And there are a lot of legislative and State Department support and research and investment into really helping those with opiate addictions become better without incarceration. When the issue was crack in our communities, that's where a lot of the policing increased and became worse.
Yes.
And the laws changed.
The war on drugs.
Yep, the legislation changed. And you found a lot of African Americans who were nonviolent with drug addictions being arrested and have felonies, which they have to live with to this day, who were addicted. But the way the media dealt with us, the way the State Departments dealt with us, the way the legislators dealt with us is vastly different than what's going on now, you know, with the opiate addiction. And I support everything they're doing. I think it's the right thing. It just didn't happen that way for us. So we have to be advocates at the state level, at the federal level, for how our communities are treated. And as the gentleman shared, he shared a bunch of approaches to his lived reality that weren't culturally competent, but when we deal with it here at the state level, it's called evidence-based, and it has data supposedly behind it, and it's supported, and providers have to pick from, you know, 1 to 5 of these methodologies to approach particular communities. But we know they're not culturally competent. So we have to make the larger state departments and federal government really respond to the needs of our community at this level.
So based on, you know, what you've heard today, there is no broad brushstroke to addressing healing. It's just impossible to apply a one-size-fits-all to that. And I think, you know, even with Mr. Weston, a lot of what we heard is it's all about listening. It's all about relationships to really get a better understanding of what's needed. No matter the program, you still have to look at what works for this specific person in this specific segment in this specific community. So, you know, that's a tremendous takeaway. So, one more round of applause for us.